The water is warm on his skin, but salty on his tongue. Izuku leans his head back, dipping the back of his green hair into the ocean, and relaxes his body into the current of the waves. He thinks that he'd like to make this moment last forever. And when Izuku opens his eyes again and straightens his head forward, he's met with the sight of Katsuki, shoulder deep into the salty water, saying something he couldn't really make out through his water-clogged ears against the backdrop of one of the most beautiful sunsets the city of Ise has ever seen. Ise, if nothing else, is static. It doesn't really change much, just like its people. Sometimes the thought is comforting, other times it's suffocating. Even the sunsets don't change. Always a beautiful array of colors painting the sky. Puffs of clouds in different hues of pinks, oranges, reds, and purples. But no matter how beautiful a sunset is, you can only watch it so many times. No matter how delicious a dish is, you can only eat it so many times. No matter how euphoric a song is, you can only hear it so many times. No matter how easy and comfortable a life is, you can only live it so many days before you begin to wish for change, crave it, thirst for it, desire it more than anything else. And Izuku has been feeling that for a while now, ever since he was able to taste freedom. Although the sunsets were gorgeous, it was so unchanging that Izuku sometimes wished it would rain. The rainfall during the spring and summer months in Ise was not much, but when it did rain, it rained like hell. Today was not one of the days where Izuku wished it would rain, because the glow of the sunset behind Katsuki's blonde hair would disappear. Because then the ocean water wouldn't be as warm. Because then there wouldn't be a pink reflection of the sky on the water's surface like there is now. When he came back to Earth, Katsuki was snapping his fingers in his face. "Oi, Deku!" Katsuki's deep voice caught his attention. "Did you hear a fucking word I said?" Izuku blinked, drawing all of his senses back into the moment, then sheepishly answered, "No, sorry. I was thinking about something. Can you repeat that?" The blonde rolled his eyes, but did so anyway, bouncing to jump over the incoming wave. "I was saying that I had a dream last night, and you were in it. I woke up pissed off that I had to see you in real life all the damn time, just to see you again when I go to sleep." Izuku shook his head, splashing water into Katsuki's face. He wouldn't have taken this opportunity to remind Katsuki that they had only had to see each other once a week, but for the past however long, they were going 2 to 3 times a week, which is insane considering Katsuki's schedule. The tournament season was jam-packed. However, Izuku was not going to bring up that fact to Katsuki and potentially ruin whatever it was that they were. "I apologize that my imaginary self invaded your dream," Izuku sarcastically giggled and then asked, "What was I doing in your dream?" Katsuki then floated back onto the water, letting his body loose and close his eyes. Izuku watched him and swam closer, making sure the blonde didn't float away into the current. "We were heroes, and we didn't go to Ise High. It was a school with a weird name, 2 letters or something. UE, UA, I don't know." Katsuki recalled his dream, eyes still closed. "UA?" Izuku laughed. "That was the name of the hero school we came up with when we were kids, remember?" "Was it?" Katsuki asked. "Anyways, I was saying, we were heroes, and I had this fucking cool-ass power where I made things explode from the palm of my hand using sweat." "Sounds like a power you'd have," Izuku smiled, sliding over the sand under his feet. "Very versatile." Katsuki hummed, then opened his eyes, looking over to Izuku. "And you weren't born with powers, but got some by swallowing Mr. Toshinori's hair. Dreams are fucking weird," he chuckled. "But it gave you super strength. And then for some reason we had to beat up Mr. Toshinori together in a test at the hero school." "Did we win?" Izuku asked, intrigued. Katsuki got back in an upright position and shrugged. "I don't know. I woke up." Izuku looked up at the pretty pink clouds. "Do you believe in alternate realities?" Katsuki rolled his eyes at this. "We're getting philosophical now, aren't we, nerd?" Before huffing out. "But nah, because that means there's an alternate reality where you're cooler than me, and that just defies the laws of the universe." "Kachan!" Izuku kicked the athlete under the water, then shrugged. But I don't know. I think it's a fun idea to think about. Maybe in another world we could be heroes. Then Izuku thought about it some more. We're hero partners. How about that? Katsuki grinned at the green ant. Me? Partners with you? Hell no. Izuku frowned, then sauntered over where Katsuki was, the water slowing him down. Kachan, you're partners with me right now. Yeah, and it's a pain in the ass, Katsuki teased, coming in to poke Izuku in the chest. And now, you're starting to call me at night too? Christ, it's like a full-time job, Deku. That was true. This past week, Izuku would find himself randomly calling Katsuki some nights just to talk for a little bit. If it means that it would drown out the tensions that had been building up in his household. He thinks that maybe if he hears Katsuki's voice, it would make his mother's guilt-tripping and strained voice from one of their awkward disagreements go away. Izuku wonders if Katsuki could tell that this was why he was calling, because Izuku would usually open up a call with some slight breakage in his voice. He's always been prone to cry, and hated that about himself. He's tried every single time he felt the urge to tear up, to suppress it, to think of all the reasons why he shouldn't be upset, to control his emotions. But it's really fucking difficult. If Katsuki knew, then he'd kept quiet about it. No one is making you pick up, Kachan, Izuku reasoned. Katsuki didn't have a good response to this, and instead diverted the conversation by turning around, telling Izuku, Whatever. Oi, you want to see how far we can swim out? Izuku looked towards the horizon, then back at Katsuki. What if we get caught in a riptide? Swim parallel to the shoreline until you're out of it, Katsuki responded fairly quick, turning his back towards Izuku and eyes set on the horizon. You in or not? Sure, but hey, Izuku frowned as he swam a bit closer to Katsuki, noticing something on the taller's back. They seemed like long stretch marks that started from the athlete's shoulders and ran down his back in thin lines, like fingernail patterns. That was odd. Izuku hadn't seen those before when they had gone swimming at the lake a couple days ago. It must have been recent. Izuku had an idea of what they were, but for some reason felt the urge to ask anyway. Izuku, without thinking, touched his fingers to the scratches, and Katsuki's back tenses up as he turns his head to the side to eye the green ant. Izuku looked up through long lashes before asking, What are these? From the side, Katsuki gave him a look and raised a brow, before turning to grab a hold of Izuku's wrist, stopping the contact. Sex, the other replied, frank as can be. With his wrist in Katsuki's rough hands, and those ruby eyes staring down at him, Izuku felt the urge to step back. Huh? Then the blonde spoke. Don't tell me you've never been fucked so hard that you leave scratches on someone's back. So that confirms it. Izuku blushed and looked down to the side, wrist still in Katsuki's hold. He wasn't about to admit that no, he hasn't. He tries not to envision it. Katsuki, the boy in front of him, fucking someone so rough that they drag their nails down his back like that. He tries not to think about it, because then the odd feeling in his gut will persist. That one that is currently making Izuku confused, because why is his stomach feeling like it's being pulled taut at what Katsuki implied? That's none of your business. Izuku blinked up at Katsuki a couple times, and tried to find something to derail the conversation. Katsuki looked at him strangely, then, before bringing a hand up to gently swipe something off Izuku's cheek. Izuku looked down to where Katsuki's hand touched his face in a manner that was almost like a caress. What is it? Katsuki dropped his hand. An eyelash. Oh, Izuku said, feeling a bit ashamed that his neck flared up with the heat at the contact. Katsuki chuckled then, but I have to ask you, Deku, he said before turning his head towards the horizon. After a moment of no continuation, Izuku swam after him and asked, Yes? While still stroking through the water, Katsuki turned his head for a quick moment to flash Izuku a grin. Why do you ask me a question that you already knew the answer to? Nope, Izuku was not going to reply to that one. Did he know what those scratches were? Sure, he had a very good guess. Did he ask anyways? He absolutely did. Why? That was the tougher one. Izuku doesn't let himself ponder on the thought, but somewhere deep inside himself he knew exactly why he asked. He asked because simply he wondered if there could have been another explanation. As for why he hoped for that, he didn't know. That was no lie. They swam further out, and yet they never reached the horizon. That was the beautiful thing about the ocean. It never felt as if it ended. Although Izuku was slightly paranoid about the mysterious things that may be swimming underneath him as he ventured further out, he was more focused on how tired his limbs were getting. When it comes to swimming out deep, a person gets no breaks. If you stop swimming or treading water, then you drown. "Kachan, I'm getting tired," Izuku called out. "If I drown, my ghost will forever haunt you for this idea." Katsuki stopped swimming forward and then turned around. "Fuck, I'm getting to that point too." "So we'll both be ghosts," Izuku chimed. "How much longer can you tread water?" Katsuki looked out to the shore. "Enough to get us back to shore. Oi, look, we made it pretty fucking far." Izuku looked back and was pleasantly surprised by how far they'd gone out. Sure, there was probably more than 40 feet of ocean behind them, and they had long passed where the ocean floor dropped off, but hey, they got pretty far. Swimming back, however, is much harder because of the current. "But can we make it back is the real question," Izuku pondered as he started his journey back, doing freestyle strokes. "Maybe I should have listened to my mother and stayed home after all." Katsuki rolled his eyes as he followed in suit. "You'll make it back, nerd. I'm not gonna let you drown." Izuku laughed through labored breaths. "What a surprise!" Katsuki swam ahead of Izuku, splashing water in the greenette's face. "For that, I just might." They did make it back to shallow water, and the moment Izuku's feet hit sand, he hollered out and rejoiced, before realizing he doesn't have much more lung capacity to holler out. Katsuki, who was used to the intense cardio on a daily, was breathing a bit more heavily than usual, but otherwise looked fine. And so, they messed around in this stretch of beach for a while longer, not really wanting to leave the warm confines of a beautiful ocean water. As the sun goes down and twilight comes, the color of the water was turning into a more deep purple. On the left side were the mountains that situated itself near Ise, lush and green, and going all the way out into the water. On the right side was the rest of Ise, and whatever there was on the coast. Some beachside shores, sporadically placed here and there, some beach houses, or just anything else. Further down the strip of the beach, about a mile or so, was Ise's dock and marina, where all the citizens' boats were stored. Katsuki's family had a nice speedboat docked down there, and another one at Lake Enek, one of the bigger lakes in the area. A mile from the ocean marina was the commercial fishing port. Those waters were usually never swam in because of how many fishing boats are out there every single day. But on the stretch of beach that they were currently playing around in, the sands were so white and clean that it squeaked beneath their feet. The waters were just as clean and beautiful, aside from the occasional jellyfish, and the backdrop was just plain gorgeous. To top it off, Izuku finds himself laughing a lot in Katsuki's presence. Every moment felt like he was in a movie, where two main characters have some type of beautiful fun in the sun, with their heads thrown back in laughter and some sappy song playing in the background. But with Izuku, instead of a sappy song, he gets to hear Katsuki yelling at him for stupid things. After another 30 minutes of messing about near the shallow end, Izuku commented, "Ice cream sounds nice right now." Katsuki splashed some water in his own face, slicking his hair back. The way his hands were bent over his head revealed a nice toneness of the athlete's arms and lats. "Shit, that does sound good." Katsuki then wadded out of the water, legs dragged against the waves, heading towards the shore. Izuku, feeling slightly weird about being in the now dark ocean by himself, followed suit. "We're going up?" Izuku asked to confirm. Katsuki hummed in response. "Gonna get us some ice cream. I know a shop near here." "Really?" Izuku hurried in pace, excited. Katsuki looked back at him. "Your eyes get all big and shit when you're excited. Fucking stop it. It's creepy." Izuku rolled his eyes and frowned. "You're still saying that?" "Yep," Katsuki nodded, grabbing the towel they left on the beach and drying himself off. Izuku did the same. Without putting on a shirt, Katsuki did a light jog towards the car. Not wanting to be left behind, Izuku ditched putting on his shirt and did the same. The ice cream parlor was barely 5 minutes down the road, directly parallel to the beach. Although it would have taken longer, they honestly could have walked. But instead, Katsuki wanted to drive down the boulevard at night with the windows down so that it would dry his hair and his damp torso. Izuku leaned back against his seat, head tilted to lazily look over at the handsome athlete from the side, and wondered to himself how unfair it was. There was only so much talent and beauty in this world, so how was it that Katsuki took so much of it? But then again, he reasoned with himself. There was also so much room for assholery in this world, and Katsuki took a good amount of that too. When they pulled up to the parking lot of the ice cream parlor, Izuku frowned. "It's closed for tonight," the greenette says. From the outside, it was an adorable place, matching with the retro theme of Issei. The outside had a bright neon green and pink light that lined the perimeter of the store windows. Above the entrance, it read, "Seaside Ice Cream," in blue neon, and underneath that, smaller text that read, "Open since '82. Izuku had a faint memory of his dad taking him here once when he was young. He had no recollection of anything else about that day, just the name of the parlor. The inside was dark, considering that it was closed. Chairs were stacked on top of tables, and the booths were wiped clean. The area where the ice cream was kept at the side of the store, where the checkout was located, was lit up by backlit neon paneling running behind the signs, so there was a hazy neon blue glow inside too, despite everything else being dark. Katsuki looked over to the side at Izuku before taking off his seatbelt and grabbing something from the center console. "I know." Then the blonde exited the car, heading to the entrance. Izuku, confused but curious, leaves the vehicle as well. Going up behind Katsuki, he went straight up to the door and pulled out a metal pick. That was probably what he had grabbed from the console, and then he inserted the thin piece of metal into the lock. Izuku's eyes widened. "Kachan, I understand half the things we do aren't really legal, but breaking into a place is just a tad bit more illegal." Katsuki focused as he moves his pick through the lock, assures the greenette. "Relax, it's my uncle's. He thinks I'm the fucking family jewel and that I can do no wrong, which to be fair, I can't. He'd probably be honored that I'm breaking into his shop." "Still makes this breaking and entering," Izuku argued. "If you're so scared, go back in the car," Katsuki humored, still trying at the lock. Izuku pursed his lips, but stands watch anyways. Fuck for the 15th time, Izuku faces the fact that Katsuki brings out the worst in him. Yet, he thinks to balance it out a little bit, Izuku likes to believe that he's bringing out the best in Katsuki, little by little. Sure, the blonde is extremely emotionally unavailable, and avoids anything sentimental when possible, but there have been moments of time wherein Izuku can maybe get a little something out of him. Like when Katsuki told him how sad he got after his old dog died. Izuku considered that a victory. Sadness. So the great Katsuki is able to feel that too. When Izuku didn't move, Katsuki chuckled. "That's right. You stay there, and be my Bonnie." Izuku laughed at this. "Bonnie? As in the criminal duo Bonnie and Clyde?" "Who the fuck else?" Katsuki asked. Izuku ran a hand through his hair and wondered how odd they looked. Two shirtless boys, and huddled in front of a closed shop. He also does not disclose that Bonnie and Clyde were not just a duo, but a couple. But that wasn't what Katsuki meant, so he left it silent. "Why do I have to be Bonnie? Why can't you be Bonnie? I want to be Clyde," Izuku pestered the other. Katsuki paused what he was doing, then stood up to his full height, turned slightly to look down on Izuku, who barely reached his shoulders, then flexed just how much larger he was in terms of body mass and muscle. It was an intimidation factor, and Izuku knew it, but that didn't mean he didn't feel like he shrunk to the size of a pea. Staring right down at Izuku, Katsuki quirked an eyebrow, and then smirked. "This is why." Izuku mentally forced himself not to stammer, before shoving Katsuki slightly. "Don't forget, I stood a fair chance beating you up, Kanchan." Katsuki shrugged, then went back to picking the lock, which was taking a terribly long time. It wasn't as if the blonde picked locks often. "Never said you didn't. There's nothing wrong with being Bonnie. She was a badass. Or are you sexist or something?" Katsuki sneered. Izuku was tempted to kick him over. "You always make me out to be the bad guy. I would never." Katsuki snorts, and then the lock clicks finally. "I fucking know. You wouldn't even hurt a fly, even if it deserves it. It's one of the things I hate about you." Izuku gaped at the comment. Katsuki said it so casually that it was surely just a jest. "Are you serious?" Izuku frowned in confusion. "Nah," Katsuki replied, almost bored. "Anyways, you coming in or not?" Izuku pursed his lips and then walked in to the now open door. "Can't believe you actually managed to get in." "After all this time, and you still can't believe it?" Katsuki laughs as he closes the door behind them. "It'll be fine. I'll put a $10 on the counter so it's not like we really stole any ice cream. Katsuki then walked over to the back where the employees would work and then turned on the device connected to the parlor speakers. After browsing a bit, Katsuki went on I Want to Know What Love Is by Foreigner, another classic. Izuku wonders how the athlete can listen to so many sentimental songs but feel none of it. As the music begins to play in the background, Katsuki then leans his forearm over the glass casing on top of where the ice cream was. The soft neon glow in the otherwise dark parlor highlighted the sharp features of Katsuki's face. Oi, shitty customer, with the shitty hair, welcome to Seaside Ice Cream. Katsuki pretended to be an employee from behind the counter. Which flavor of liquid calories can I delight your ass with today? Izuku grinned to himself and sauntered slowly across the array of ice cream available, not breaking eye contact with Katsuki the entire time. 1 scoop of mint chocolate chip and 1 scoop of cherry Garcia. Katsuki shakes his head in disapproval. Did I hear banana pudding? I think I heard banana pudding. Izuku giggles. Then you need to get your hearing checked. Katsuki rolled his eyes, but grabbed a waffle cone and slid open the glass door to scoop out 1 mint chocolate chip and 1 cherry Garcia. Izuku pretended to wait at the cashier counter, leaned over and smiling to himself as he hums along to the music. He could see his faint reflection in the glass of the ice cream covering. Izuku's hair was dry but looked like it was wind-swept with the ocean salt still in it. His cheeks were freckled and pink from the slight sunburn he obtained being out in the water for so long, and his nicely lean but sturdy build looked a little bit tanner too. Katsuki came over to the counter where Izuku was waiting and leaned on it as well, handing the greenette his cone before declaring his price. That'll be $4.95, bitch. Izuku takes his coin and grins. Oh no, I didn't bring any cash. Katsuki leans on his elbow some more and gives him a sly smile. Shitty customer. In what way do you plan on paying me back then? Izuku snorts at how ridiculous they were being. It was obvious that the two were messing around, with the over-the-top acting like they were in a porn scenario. But Izuku doesn't stop, trying not to laugh as he licks his ice cream while maintaining eye contact with the blonde before asking, How would you like me to pay? It looked as if Katsuki was trying to hold back a laugh himself, even if his eyes did dart down to Izuku's tongue once, and then cracked his knuckles. A damn foot massage would be nice. Fuck pole vault practice. It has been killing me lately. Which completely ruined the moment, and Izuku bursted out in laughter, his shoulders shaking gently. With Katsuki, it can sometimes be so easy to let go and laugh like this. He was happy, and he'll continue to be happy for another 30 minutes or so, as Katsuki gets his own ice cream, 2 scoops of banana pudding ice cream, and they settle on the top of the counter to eat it and talk. Izuku would occasionally glance out of the window, paranoid that he might see some flashing blue and white lights of police once they see 2 random boys inside of a closed ice cream parlor. But other than that, the vibes were wonderful. Izuku had always had a thing for a beautiful neon glow. The way the blues and orange, pinks, and reds faintly covered different parts of the shop was stunning, combined with the softness of the music. Katsuki was currently talking about this one particular pole vaulter who was a new transfer from a different school when he was at a tournament, and the boy had talked up a storm about winning just to get his ass handed to him by Bakudeku Katsuki himself. Izuku ate the last piece of his waffle cone while listening intently, enjoying every word that comes out of the other's mouth. He was getting used to the way Katsuki talked, gruff, brash, rude, informative, yet the words were casual, and for him, they didn't seem to have a true bite in them, and Izuku found himself always immersed in some kind of conversation with the other. They stayed there for a while until it was nearing 11 p.m. At this point, both of their hairs were dry, but sticky from the salty ocean water, and their skin was speckled with residual sand that stuck to their legs and arms. Suddenly, Izuku's phone rang, with a familiar ringtone that often causes Izuku a bit of dread. He fishes the device out of his pocket before checking the caller ID. He looks at it for a moment, lips pursed, eyes darting away. Izuku notices Katsuki watching the interaction with curious eyes, as if waiting to see what the greenette was going to do. Izuku picks up his phone and puts on a bright voice. Hi, Mom! Izuku? She repeats herself, worry evident in her tone. Izuku, where are you? Izuku looks around, biting his lip. She'd known that every ice cream parlor was closed by 11 p.m., so he just says, "I've been at the beach." "At night?" Inko sounded disapproving. "There are no lifeguards at night, and the riptides can be dangerous. Izuku, do you know how irresponsible that is? Do you know what I'd do if you disappeared?" Izuku wanted to protest, but he bit down harder on his lip and tried to think happy thoughts to calm his upsetness. "Thank you for worrying, but I'll be fine, Mom. I'm a strong swimmer, plus I was having fun." He tried to reason politely. "Fun needs to have boundaries, Zuko," Inko exasperatedly said through the line, voice still sweet. "I don't want you or Katsuki to be going to the beach at night from now on. I don't want to do this, Izuku, because you've always been such a good boy, but if you don't listen to me, I will register a tracker on your phone." Izuku's eyes widened, and he gaped at his phone. A tracker? His mother, no matter what, has never gone that far. To be fair, he has never gone out to this extent, and their conversations lately have been filled with juxtapositions, moments of good conversations, then moments of tense, uncomfortable ones, back and forth. But this was a tad far. He would feel absolutely terrible and violated in terms of privacy if Inko was able to check where he was every moment of the day. The potential loss in autonomy scared him. Izuku glanced over at Katsuki, who also seemed slightly surprised at her suggestion that sounded more like a threat, but his stoic face went back to usual, and he tapped his fingers on the counter. Izuku almost felt embarrassed. "You won't have to," Izuku said softly. "I'll head home right now." Inko sounded excited. "Great! Do you need—" He cut off the line, not wanting to hear her voice anymore. He stood there for a second in silence, trying to collect himself so that he doesn't get angry. He was worried, irrationally, but that's how it was. Getting angry never fixed anything, and so he took deep breaths and looked back up at Katsuki. Izuku had no intention of getting a tracker on his phone, not when his life was going this well. "You're not going to get that shit on your phone," Katsuki declared finally. Izuku smiled and looked down. "I don't plan to. If it ever comes down to it, I'll just leave my phone in my room and pretend I'm asleep." "Or you could just tell her to fuck off," Katsuki suggested, and ruin my relationship with her?" Izuku gaped. "No thank you, Kachan." "It was ruined the moment she started treating you like her lapdog." Katsuki rolled his eyes. Izuku frowned. "She does not—" "Lapdogs are kept in the house all the damn time. When they're allowed to go out, it's on a leash with their owner. And if they randomly go out by themselves, what do the owners do? Panic. Because sure, dogs that leave the house might never come back. Or they might. Because sure, dogs that leave their house might come back, or they might not. You want to know what it is? I think that Auntie is afraid that one day you might not want to come back to her and be her lapdog." Katsuki completed his analogy, not missing a beat. "I'm not a dog," he stated, "and she's just worried about my safety." "Sure. I'm sure that's part of it, too." Katsuki tapped his fingers some more. "But you ever think about this, Deku? When did she start acting like this? Did a certain fucking event happen? Come on." He snapped his fingers in Izuku's face. "Think, Deku." Izuku pushed Katsuki's condescending fingers out of his face. "She's just always been like this. I get the frustration, but I don't know why you have such a problem. She's a good person, Kachan." "I wasn't saying she's not." Katsuki sounded irritated at the conversation. Izuku felt on the line between defensive and agreeing. "But you're misunderstanding her intentions." "I'm not misunderstanding shit." Katsuki tongued his cheek. "Listen, I'm getting real fucking impatient with you. If you want to stay ignorant, do it. I don't give a flying fuck." "Of course you don't." Izuku found himself breathing out, looking away, but not quick enough to have missed the faint and brief look of surprise present on Katsuki's face at the accusing comment, as if he had never expected Izuku to have a different thought on the matter. The air was suddenly just a tad bit tense, and Izuku didn't even know why the conversation switched to what it had. After a moment of silence, Katsuki spoke again, normal voice as if they weren't squabbling moments earlier. "Oi, when I drop you off, you think Auntie will let me take a quick shower at your place?" Katsuki cracked his neck and asked. Izuku blinked in confusion. "I mean, of course you will, but why can't you shower at your house?" "Because I got somewhere to fucking be after." Katsuki rolled his eyes, while turning off the music and hopping over the counter. Izuku was curious. Oh, okay, where do you have to be? Katsuki laid down a $10 bill on the counter and turned his head to look down at Izuku from the side with a slight quirk of his brow. An appointment. Izuku snorted. An appointment? Kachan, what kind of appointment at this time? Katsuki shoved his wallet back into his pocket, then quirked his ruby eyes, stepping closer until Izuku was staring up at the blonde's chin. Katsuki used one finger to tilt Izuku's chin up to look at him. Use that brain of yours, Deku. What kind of appointment do you think it is? Ain't that hard to figure out, or are you really just that sheltered? Izuku blushed red, his green eyes blinking a couple of times before he forced his chin away. In a moment of delirium, his mind had blanked. Of course the athlete was talking about that kind of appointment. A fucking dick appointment. The term seemed adolescent, but it was enough to get Izuku to understand now. He felt this strange sensation in his gut, one that had been feeling a couple times recently when it came to Katsuki. Each time he'd ignored it, and pretended that there was another logical explanation as to why his stomach would hurt a bit every time Katsuki would say something like this. He thought of who it might have been, who Katsuki was planning to see tonight, and then he mentally cursed himself, shoving the odd feeling in his stomach away. He told himself it didn't matter. Oh, Izuku breathed out, feeling fidgety. Katsuki grinned. So you do know. Kachan, don't treat me like a child, Izuku said with pursed lips as he looked up at the taller. I'm not a kid anymore. Izuku could tell for the most part Katsuki still viewed Izuku as someone who was naive when it came to certain things, and in turn, Izuku will never be grouped in the same category as the girls or guys that the blonde fucks. In Katsuki's eyes, Izuku knew that he was seen as inexperienced, naive, and the like. Izuku didn't know why he felt such an incessant need to prove the athlete wrong, even if he wasn't entirely wrong. Katsuki only continued to smirk at this and push forward, causing Izuku to take a step back, holding his breath. Not a kid anymore, huh? Little nerd, you wear superhero pajamas. You have your mommy's breath down your neck everywhere. Got these little freckles, and you blush like a fucking middle schooler brat at everything. Now move aside and let the adults play. Katsuki practically breathed near his face. Izuku felt stuck in his spot, barely able to handle the proximity between the two of them. Katsuki's presence was also so demurring that it made Izuku feel tiny. He was almost offended by Katsuki's comment. He knew that he was not as out there as other people, but the fact that Katsuki barely saw him as an adult with his desires, mature thoughts, and whatnot made Izuku want to prove so badly how wrong he was. Not that he knew how. And so instead, Izuku just elbowed the athlete in the gut and huffed his way towards the door. I hope whoever you hook up with tonight doesn't come, and I hope she thinks your dick is small, Kachan. It was definitely an uncharacteristic statement, but Izuku was slightly mad, and the reaction was priceless though. As Katsuki exits the parlor, locking the door behind him, he then claps. Well, fuck. Would you look at that? So you can talk back, he barks out, a laugh. But I must disappoint you, nerd. Neither of those things are happening. Izuku throws back a middle finger, and Katsuki fakes being offended as they both settle into the car. If it's one thing that having Katsuki accompany him into his house is good for, it's that having the blonde there prevents Inko from getting too much onto Izuku, for she wouldn't berate him seriously in front of a guest. When he arrived home, the woman was sitting on the bar stool sipping a cup of warm milk, and seemed as if she had been watching the door for a while. The exchange was kept as brief as possible, with Izuku wanting to minimize the time he had to endure his mother's paranoid and overly obsessive eyes on him, and although her words and tone were normal as if she talked to Katsuki and him, Izuku still felt as if her eyes were begging him for something. Dragging the blonde up into his room, Izuku tossed him a towel and a pair of oversized clothes that would hopefully fit the taller well enough, before Katsuki entered the bathroom hogging the shower. Meanwhile, Izuku settles on the edge of his bed, sitting on his knees, and stares at his room. Childish figurines, rows of comic books, raggedy t-shirts and shorts flung here and there, and he looked at his reflection from the full-body mirror hanging off his bathroom door. Just look at me, Izuku thinks to himself. His messy green hair will probably never get into place, and now there was salt and sand all up in it. He reached a hand up to touch his freckles. They made him look even more childish. and then his large eyes. His body wasn't delicate and slender, but instead lean and fit. At least that was something. Izuku realizes just then that he's never really thought too much about his appearance or how he presented himself. Maybe Katsuki was right, and he did look naive. With a slight heavy heart, Izuku caresses his face and wonders why, even though he works out, he'll never lose the baby face. His self-staring session came to a halt when the bathroom door opened, and out came the boy, who was blessed with the appearance of a god. Everything from Katsuki's chiseled jaw to his sculpted figure to the intensity of his red eyes were unreal. His clothes were a tighter fit on the athlete, but he still looked incredible. Life was unfair. Izuku's eyes were locked on Katsuki's as the freshly showered athlete walked forward to where he was kneeling on the corner of the bed, hands in his laps. The only light that illuminated the room came from the partially open bathroom. "You gonna go?" Izuku asked. It was a dumb question. Of course the blonde was gonna go. For what? "You're gonna go?" "You're gonna go?" Izuku asked. "You're gonna go?" Izuku asked. It was a dumb question. Of course the blonde was going to go. For what reason would he stay? Katsuki ran a hand through his hair. "In a few minutes." Izuku felt a kick in the gut again. He kicked back, ignoring the mysterious feeling. "Okay, have fun." The words felt numb on his tongue, and he struggled to find a reason why. Katsuki sneered and reached for his wallet and keys that he had set down on the bed. "See ya, nerd." Izuku gave him a soft smile before shooing the other out. "See ya, Kao-chan." And Katsuki leaves through his bedroom door. Izuku stupidly wonders why his hands were gripping the fabric of his shorts so tightly, and he wonders why, in his head, he asks himself questions he isn't sure he wants the answers to. Who is Katsuki meeting? What are they like? What do they look like? Do they watch Katsuki like he does? Before biting his lips so hard that he almost bled. He had no reason to be thinking such thoughts. Katsuki is just a partner and a growing friend, if he dare says. Izuku sat at the lunch table with his friends, cheek resting on his palms, as he thinks. He's been quiet throughout the day, and it was making his other three friends uneasy. The quartet came early to the cafeteria, settling down at their table that was too large for them. Ochako had recapped what had happened to her mean cousin the other day at the mall. Shoto was once again complaining about his dad, and Ida just told them some interesting facts he picked up from the class he had just left. "Midoriya, are you okay?" Shoto asked while stabbing his pork cutlet. "You've been staring off into space." Izuku blinked and shook his head yes. "Yeah, I'm okay. I was just thinking." "About?" Ochako sipped her strawberry milk. The way Izuku blushed revealed enough, and Ochako snorted. "Never mind, I know who you're thinking about." "Midoriya, I can't say pursuing Bakugo Katsuki is the best idea, considering his reputation with romance." Ida picked up the hint as well. Izuku waved his hands in front of him. "No, you guys have got it all wrong. I'm not pursuing him. We're not like that. We're just hanging out together, like friends," Izuku then added. "At the end of the day, someone else is keeping Kao-chan company. He doesn't see me like that." He dug into the katsudon, stuffing his cheeks full of food as he looked intently at his plate. He could tell his friends had lingering eyes on him. "You sound jealous," Ochako began. Izuku freaked out for a second, almost exasperated. "I'm not jealous." And then an unfamiliar addition to their lunch group spoke up. "Not jealous of what?" Izuku turned his head to see that Denki Kaminari had sat down next to him, face equipped with a large electric smile and a pat on the back. But it wasn't just Denki. Almost all the Vultures started moving into their table, and since Izuku and all his friends knew them pretty well, they were met with welcome. Katsuki sat 2 seats diagonal from him, and didn't really say any greeting to Izuku, or any of his friends really, even though everyone else did. To be fair, Katsuki rarely ever talked to him at school. Izuku turned his head to where the male pole vaulters usually ate their lunch, to see that their table had been occupied by what looked like to be the school's county inspectors, who came once in a while to check the condition of everything and everyone. And so instead, since Izuku and his friends solely occupied a table with 10 seats, and there were 6 left for some of the pole vaulters, and 2 just had to share seats. "Sorry for the intrusion, guys. Kirishima smiled wryly. We got booted out of our table for the day. Shota shrugged. Don't say sorry. We're all buds. Sora leaned over to Ochako. Uraraka, how's your fight lessons going? I've been seeing you post about it. It looks really badass. He laughed. I got to fly my first piston plane yesterday. It was amazing, and it felt like I was defying gravity. She laughed. My instructor said I did really good, and that she'll recommend me for an aviation university in Tokyo after graduation. Izuku smiled as he listened to Ochako and then talk excitedly about it. He adored his friends and truly did like when all of them came together like this to talk. It felt easier, now that he and Katsuki were not at each other's throats, but that didn't mean it wasn't slightly strange that everyone in their school at this point practically knew they hung out, but would never see Katsuki or Izuku interact with each other in school. The conversation in the group was easy and boisterous. Izuku chimed in here and there, and everyone felt pretty comfortable as the lunch period continued. There was a lot of laughter, and it looked like everyone liked the new company. Then someone who hadn't talked yet piped up. So Midoriya, Kaido said and suddenly calls out, fork digging into a strip of marinated steak. How's badminton coming along? You play here and there with the Issei rec team, right? Izuku was a bit surprised that Kaido knew, since he was pretty low-key about it. Katsuki lifted his head up from where he was eating and gave Kaido a funny look, which the Vulture ignored. Yeah, how'd you know? Izuku asked with a smile. I saw your name on the roster. Kaido scratched the back of his head shyly. Izuku shrugged. The season starts in the summer, but I really only play so that I can test out some of the hypotheses I have about the techniques and analyze the movements. Oh, really? Are you trying to get into sports medicine at university? Kaido asked, curious. Izuku tucked a stray hair behind his ear. Well, my mom wants me to do something nearby, so I don't know. Well, Kaido encouraged him. If you ever have time, I'd love to hear more about your analysis, as an athlete myself. Maybe over coffee or something? A coffee date, so normal, Izuku thought, then bit his tongue. It was supposed to be cute, and a traditional move. He hadn't even agreed yet, but he already felt hesitant. Stop that, Izuku, he told himself. He's a nice person. Katsuki then enters their conversation to leave a quick remark. If you want the nerd to talk your head off for hours, then sure, fucking go for it. Izuku found himself agreeing with Katsuki, and did feel kinda sorry about that. It seems as if he really does often talk forever to Katsuki when they were hanging out about random topics, including what new things in the realm of sports, particularly Katsuki's pole vault, that he is obsessed with or trying to figure out. However, when he does this, the blonde would occasionally tell him to shut up, but ultimately, he'll listen and give him a surprisingly great feedback. The athlete has even told Izuku some of his footwork techniques that he uses to gain more momentum, and so, even if Katsuki complains, Izuku doesn't truly believe he hates listening. However, Kaido, not knowing this, turns to Katsuki and casually grins. That's fine with me, Bakugo. Unlike you, I care about what Midoriya has to say. Suddenly, the tension at the table heightened, as everybody goes rigid at the slight jab at Bakugo Katsuki of all people. Kaido had said it with a full smile on his face, and yet there was a condescending undertone, and Izuku suddenly felt a bit of panic. Looking over at Katsuki, the brunette notices that the blonde had now stopped eating and opted instead to give Kaido a look. He wasn't even glaring, and yet Katsuki seemed as if his eyes were telling Kaido not to test him. Oh, so you want to play White Knight now? Katsuki asked, with humor in his voice, which was almost even more patronizing than if he were to yell. Talk to me when you work up the fucking balls to talk more than a couple seconds to the shitty nerd instead of jacking off to him into a sock. Bakugo, Kirishima ushered from across the table. Remember, it's just Kaido. He always does this. Kachan, Izuku stammered, you don't have to... But then Kaido decides to speak up again. You know, the only reason Midoriya is even friends with you, if anyone can even call you guys that, is because you're good at Vault. Without Vault, you'd be nothing to him. Or to anyone. He's way too good to be friends with you. Now Izuku felt insulted. That's not true. The tension in the table shifted over to Izuku, who was trying really hard not to get angry. Kaido, I don't appreciate you speaking for me. I'm right here. I'm not some dainty and delicate damsel in distress, where you should feel the need to protect me. I can choose my own friends, so please don't ever say that again. Not about me or Kachan. At Izuku's slight outburst, Kaido then looked a bit embarrassed. Izuku could tell the table was now focused really hard on their food. Even Katsuki, who was no longer eating, didn't say anything, allowing Izuku to have his moment to talk, although he did look fairly annoyed. Kaido, after a moment, then looked genuinely apologetic. Sorry, I really didn't mean to. Izuku relaxed his shoulders. It's okay. But Kaido palmed his temple. Shit, I kinda fucked up early on, didn't I? I just got a little angry. Izuku shook his head and gave him a kind smile. You didn't mess anything up. Kacha makes everyone a little angry sometimes, he laughs. Watch it, nerd. Katsuki pointed his utensil at Izuku. Remember that you can't drive, and I'm the only one taking you to pick up that comic release. Izuku apologized immediately, laughing as he did so. Wait, give me one more chance. You still haven't massaged my feet for that ice cream, Katsuki joked. Kaido sits there watching their interactions. Excuse me, what? It's a fucking joke, fuckface. Calm down. Katsuki rolled his eyes. And it surprised the table. The two of them making jokes? Of course they knew the two of them weren't on bad terms as they used to be, but to see it in real life was something else. After a good moment or two of recovering from the slight surprise, finally the table picked back up on the conversation again, avoiding any odd topics that could start an argument as much as possible. Meanwhile, Izuku in his seat, being relatively quiet now, was reeling over the fact that, although a small detail, Katsuki didn't deny that they were friends. Of course he was sure the blonde would never admit it either, but he sure didn't deny it. Victory number 2? He wonders. Katsuki had an excused leave from school after lunch for the rest of the day, for a sports editor from some big-shot company wanted to capture some pictures and snag an interview of Katsuki to be featured in the new edition starring up-and-coming adult athletes. The blonde had mentioned it to him a couple of days ago, but when his seat was empty in their psychology class, Izuku still felt a little out of sorts. He wonders at what point did he begin to crave the athlete's company when he wasn't there. That was a normal thing to feel with a friend, right? He didn't think too hard on the matter, or else Izuku was afraid he'd come to a conclusion he's too scared to face. It also felt odd to walk home adjacent to the practice track, and, out of habit, stop to watch, only to find that Katsuki wasn't there. Of course, this happens relatively frequently. Katsuki was practically a star, and because of that, he was pulled out of school once every couple of weeks. He was wanted for sports articles, magazines, photo shoots, or maybe he had an away tournament. Either way, Izuku feels as if he knows two Katsukis, the one that sneaks him out of his house to walk around town square, who breaks into ice cream shops with him, who likes to blare 80s tracks in his ironically modern car, and the one who was recognized by many to be the future of the nation's pole vault team, a prodigy with more records and sports articles written about him since he was 14 than he can count. The playboy who can get practically anyone he wants. Funnily enough, both Katsuki's felt unreachable to Izuku, the second for obvious reasons, and the first one for the reason that every time Izuku reaches out, no matter how close they seem to be getting or much time they were spending with one another, he felt as if he'll be burned if he gets too close. Katsuki was a walking explosion, bound to burn him if he dares to get closer. Izuku gets snapped out of his thoughts when the fence rattles, and for a second the familiarity of the action makes him think that it could have been Katsuki. However, he comes face to face for the second time that day with Kaido-sen, soaking in sweat and seeming as if he had just finished his warm-ups and was waiting for his turn on the track. Kaido? Izuku asked, giving the taller boy a wave. That's my name, the athlete in question responded with a smile. If you're looking for Bakugo, he's not here today. Izuku nodded with a gentle smile. I know. That's why you're leaving, right? Kaido let out a small laugh. Izuku wasn't exactly sure what to say to that, so he settled with I'm just a little tired. Understandable, Kaido nods. School's a drag. Izuku chuckles. Sometimes. Are you sure there isn't a way I can make you stay? Kaido asked lightheartedly, and Izuku laughs at the question. He was, truthfully, a bit tired, so with an apologetic expression, the brunette simply replies, Not today. Then another day? The taller male asks. Izuku pretends to think hard on it and tells the other, Maybe. Kaido pumps his fist. I'll hold you to that then. Izuku feels weird when he gets home. It was a mix of both tiredness and frustration, over reasons he wasn't even entirely sure about. It was like he was heavy with all these odd emotions he's been feeling for the past couple days, maybe even weeks. And today, during lunch, the odd exchange between him, Kaido, and Katsuki left an odder feeling in his head, combined with the newfound insecurities about how he presents himself and his desirability. He kept conversation with his mother short, but enough to satisfy her curiosity about how his day went. Stating he was exhausted, Izuku had excused himself to head up to his room to rest. But rest didn't come easy. Rather, Izuku found himself unable to stop thinking about things he didn't want to think about. He thought about Kaido, how the athlete had good intentions, he was nice and handsome, he was clearly interested in Izuku. Yet the greenette couldn't feel himself gravitating towards the guy. He thought about his mother, how their relationship had been so off ever since he's been going out more, the way she'd almost plead with him with her large eyes and pretend that he was abandoning her every time he went out, the way she'd immediately get quiet and her voice would go into a sigh, waiting for him to ask her what's wrong, and when he'd cave in and ask, she'd tell him, nothing. And then, god damn it, he thought of Katsuki. Katsuki with his unachievable aura, with his ability to drag Izuku along everywhere, and he'd never protest. With his pole vault, Izuku almost hated thinking about the blonde, because he knew that the other was probably wasn't thinking about him. Izuku feels almost embarrassed that he likely adds nothing to Katsuki's life, despite the other having added so much to his. But, the way Katsuki tries too hard to hide his laugh at something Izuku would say, only to end up letting it out later. The way Katsuki, without a word, makes sure that he never gets too far away when they're doing something a bit sketchy. The way Katsuki would, without realizing it, be engaged in a conversation Izuku spurred on. Izuku didn't want to think that he added nothing. And then there were those eyes, those ruby eyes that always looked at him with the irritation and challenge. Those hands that would occasionally brush up against his waist when he'd walk past. Those lips that would lean over and whisper something usually rude about a stranger in his ear. Izuku felt his chest get hot, and as he laid on his bed, his fingers trailed up to his lips. Izuku felt the soft skin on his own lips and wondered what they'd feel like, raw and bruised, after being on. No. Izuku chanted to himself as he sat up suddenly. He was not going to think of Katsuki that way, someone who would never even look at him sexually. Izuku felt his heart race, and he breathed slowly to even it out. Now that he thinks about it, he hasn't touched himself in a while. It wasn't that he didn't want to, Izuku thinks deep down. It was because he was scared of what he'll find out once he lets his imagination take over. And so he's kept his pink sex toy in his drawer of his underwear, where he knows his mother won't rummage through for a bit now, not having used it. But as he remembers his tiredness and his frustration, the 7-inch dildo seems tempting. After all, masturbating is meant to release endorphins and let you sleep faster afterwards, right? In a state of lust, Izuku digs through his drawer and fishes out the pink sex toy, shaped like a real dick with veins and all, and his face flushes even though he was in the privacy of his own room. He promises himself to think of normal, sexy thoughts to get off, and not his own friend. As he strips naked, clothes gathered on the ground, Izuku steps in front of his mirror and takes a moment to admire. His body was smooth, with genetically little hair and nice legs. His thighs were pretty and thick, from both eating and never skipping leg day at the gym. The thighs then led up to a perfectly round ass, which shook prettily when he walked. His shoulders were not wide and his collarbones showed, but he was by no means princessy and delicate. His torso looked toned, and he was strong. His body was a nice mix of masculine and feminine. He avoided looking at his face, the babyish theme of all of it. His hands ran up and down his body, exciting all of the sensitive nerves everywhere, until he was sufficiently turned on. He collapsed back onto his bed and brought himself into the moment. The lamp in his room was dim, and the curtains on the window helped make it a bit moodier in the room. even though it was still light outside. Izuku closed his eyes and dragged his fingers down his throat, over his nipples which had become hard from the nipping cold air, and down his flat stomach. When he finally got around to inserting one finger soaked in lube to begin to stretch himself, the greenette bit down on his lip while suppressing a gasp. He was never one to be quiet, and usually he would play music when he was touching himself. His hole was even more sensitive than usual after a while of not being touched. It felt like all of his nerves were heightened as his index finger pushed through the tight ring of muscle. Fuck. He's definitely gotten tighter from being out of practice. But Izuku kept pushing. His legs were spread wide on the bed, back a bit arched as he threw his head back while inserting in another finger. His tempo was slow enough, and he scissored his fingers out of the impatience to get the stretching to go along quicker. He wanted something inside of him, and then and patience never felt more like a virtue than now. After the stinging pain dissipated, Izuku found himself panting and wanting more. He needed more. He hadn't even realized how sexually frustrated he'd been until now, when suddenly it felt like 2, then 3, and 4 fingers wasn't enough. With trembling hands, Izuku lubed up the pink dildo until it was slick enough, and positioned the silicone tip at his entrance. The greenette didn't bother going slow, and instead, in one go, shoved the entire toy inside. His eyes flew open, and then, sudden and sharp sensation, and his muscles contracted around the thick toy, making it feel even tighter. Rather than starting at a slow tempo, the boy began ramming it inside of his raw and pink hole. The sounds of the dildo going in and out of his juicy entrance was probably enough to reveal exactly what he was doing if his mother decided to go up the stairs. However, he could barely care. He needed this so bad, and he gave it to himself. With a hand on his cock and the other pumping the toy in and out of him at a rapid speed, Izuku wanted to cry out in desire, and he kept going like that for a while, shamelessly on his freshly changed sheets. And yet, it still didn't feel like it was enough. He wanted more, thicker, bigger, rougher. This dildo and his hands can only do so much. It wasn't enough. Izuku turns over so his face was pushed against the pillow and his ass was in the air. He had one arm reached over to his back to fuck himself with the dildo as he bites into the pillow. He wanted more so badly. Just then, a flash of Katsuki's fucking incredible physique flew through his brain in a moment of weakness. Izuku's mind fell down into the gutter because he just knew it was big, probably much bigger than the dildo he had inside of him right now. He wonders if it was pink too, with veins running down the sides and thick enough to not fit in his mouth. Izuku found himself shoving the toy in rougher and deeper in him. Would Katsuki fuck him like this, or harder? He wonders what it would feel like right now if they were rough, large hands on his hips, holding him down as he gets fucked into the mattress. Izuku finds his spot and begins ramming into it like crazy. His knees wanted to collapse, and his lips were parted, drool collecting slightly on the pillow, and he probably looked absolutely filthy, and he felt filthy. When he finally realized that at some point, in a moment of weakness, he had began to imagine Katsuki, it was too late, and Izuku was well on his way to coming. He felt absolutely dirty, thinking of his friend like that, and embarrassed. He hadn't meant to. It had just slipped into his mind, and soon enough ribbons of cum soiled the sheets underneath him as he reached his peak. And without any energy to ride it out, Izuku drops the dildo onto the cum-stained sheets and falls onto the bed, feeling the waves of orgasm wash over his body. He was panting, head still buried into the pillows, but his body was bare and laying sideways adjacent to where he had just came. Oh my god, Izuku thought to himself, did I just do that? And feelings of embarrassment, confusion, and guilt wanted to take him over, but so did feelings of exhaustion. This must have been his last straw, because instead of being a decent person and cleaning himself up, Izuku lazily pulls his blankets up to his bottom half and feels his eyelids getting heavy. A 30-minute nap. That's all he'll allow himself, he promised, and then he'll go get up and change his sheets, then clean himself up. Ideally, he'd do it right away, but he was just so tired. His hair was most definitely all rust, and beads of sweat still decorated his back, but he couldn't find the energy to care. As the world drifts farther away, all Izuku could do was promise he'll get up in 30 minutes. Thinking back, he should have set an alarm, because when Izuku did wake up, it was not the most ideal situation. In fact, when he woke up, rather than it being his body naturally wanting to get up or his mom knocking on the door, it was instead getting his forehead licked. Immediately, Izuku's eyes flew open, and upon seeing someone who was most definitely not his mom standing next to his bed, Izuku let out a yelp and bolted straight up in his bed with a scream. With incredible reflexes, a hand goes to cover his mouth, and Izuku snaps out of his position and to realize who it was. Katsuki hovered over him, hands clutched over Izuku's mouth to prevent him from screaming as he looked towards the locked door. "Fucking hell, Deku," Katsuki growled. "Calm down." Katsuki let go, and Izuku was quick to defend himself. "Kachan, if you were sleeping and someone breaks into your room, you would do the same." "No, I wouldn't," Katsuki begged to differ. "Yes, you would." Izuku glanced to the clock and then, holy shit, he's been asleep for 2 hours. He turned back to Katsuki. "Speaking of, how did you get in?" Katsuki nodded towards Izuku's window. "I jogged here, and your window was cracked open." "So you just," Izuku blinked, "broke in?" "I'd say I invited myself in, but sure." Katsuki rolled his eyes, then looked down at Izuku's attire, or more so, lack of one. Izuku, then realizing that he was completely naked, save from the blanket that was now covering his bottom half, panicked and grabbed at the blankets, pulling them up to cover his entire body. It wasn't that Katsuki hadn't seen his upper body before, it was just now shy because although Katsuki didn't know the context of why he was naked, Izuku sure did. And the thought of that had came hard with Katsuki in his brain was mortifying and a topic he wouldn't allow himself to indulge in. That was the wrong move, because the moment his blankets got pulled up to cover him, on the sheet where his cum was still obviously there, revealed the thick pink dildo that he had up his ass earlier. Izuku's face could not be any more red than it was now. The dildo was still clearly very wet, and Katsuki was in no time switching his gaze from Izuku's body down to the now revealed pink dildo. Izuku was mortified. Of course he knew most people would masturbate, but that doesn't mean he wants people, especially Katsuki, to find his dildo much less used and uncleaned. Wanting to disappear, Izuku reached for it, but not before Katsuki swiped his hand away, one brow raised as he asked Izuku, "So you've been having fun, huh?" Izuku honestly did not know how to answer that, and his mouth parted and closed like a fish. His eyes begged for the conversation to be over, and he settled with replying, "Obviously." Katsuki then reached down to pick up the toy with his whole hand, while it still had his cum on it and whatever leftover lube was there, and then Katsuki turned it over to look at the object. Izuku's voice came out high-pitched. "Put that down! I haven't washed it yet. It still has—" His ears were pink. "Stuff on it!" Katsuki ignores him, looking at the pink toy some more, before looking at Izuku and tells him, "Obviously." Katsuki's gaze was intense as it always was, and Izuku felt his tongue go dry as he came up with a way to escape to another country. "Can I have it back?" The blonde yet again ignores the request. "Fuck," Katsuki said, almost breathily, as if surprised, then looked over at Izuku's covered body. "You put this thing inside of you?" Izuku bit the inside of his cheek as he stared at the dildo, still wet, and Katsuki's grip. I mean, that's the whole purpose, right?" Katsuki nods to himself before asking, "Is this good enough for you?" "What?" Izuku asked, flustered. "It's fine." "You're telling me this shit is big enough for you." "It's a bit on the smaller end," Katsuki sneered. "You don't need something better?" Izuku let out a small voice. "Small?" The thickness of this toy and the 7-inch length was by no means small, especially when the average penis size was around 15 inches erect. And so to think that Katsuki views 7 inches as small makes Izuku reel in disbelief. "That's what I said, shit nerd." Katsuki then tosses Izuku his toy. "Anyways, go wash that and clean your sheets, you nasty bastard. I'll be on the beanbag." Izuku first demands, "Hand me my clothes first, please." Grumbling, the athlete picks up Izuku's clothes off the floor and tosses it at the greenette, who slips into his clothes from underneath the sheets. Meanwhile, Katsuki cleaned off his own hands. While Izuku was putting on new sheets, the brunette asked, "I forgot to ask. What are you doing here anyways?" "Figured you missed me." Katsuki leaned his head back on the chair with a lazy grin and grabbed a comic off of Izuku's shelf. Izuku tucked his new sheets and, in a moment of curious confidence, turned to the blonde with a shy smile. "And what if I said I did?" Katsuki looked at him with a raised brow, before huffing out a laugh, pulling himself up on the seat to lean on his elbows. "Well, shit. I guess I'm here." Izuku laughed and bounced back on his clean bed. "How was your interview?" Katsuki flipped through the pages of the comic. "Shitty as always. The fucker took forever, too. I hate missing practices." The brunette leaned back on his arms. "If it makes you feel any better, Kachan, I'll buy the magazine edition when it comes out." Katsuki rolled his eyes. "Why would that make me feel any better, nerd? What, you gonna put it on that shrine?" He nodded to the shelf. Izuku felt slightly embarrassed. "And what about it?" The athlete chuckled. "You're getting real bold for someone who has a shrine to me." "It's not a shrine," Izuku defended. "I told you, I needed somewhere to put the things. If you want to see a shrine, I have an All Might shrine in my closet for you to look at." Katsuki got up to check the closet. "Have you ever seen old pictures of Mr. Toshinori before he got all scrawny?" "No," Izuku frowned. "They're online," Katsuki mentioned. "He used to be some type of fighter and bodybuilder back in the days. The man kind of looked like All Might." Izuku was shocked. "I'm gonna search this up. You have to be lying." "Nope." Katsuki shook his head as he stared at the figurine collection. "Go ahead." Izuku pulls out his phone to fact-check the athlete. Meanwhile, Katsuki closes the closet. "In all seriousness, I need you to catch me up on what I missed today in class." Izuku looked up and poked fun at the blonde. "Are you asking me for help?" Katsuki rolled his eyes. "No, consider this returning the favor for that time I helped you with physics." "Whatever you say, Kachan," Izuku said in his sing-song voice, chuckling to himself as he gets off the bed to fish for his notes. "Whatever you say, Kachan," Izuku said in a sing-song voice, chuckling to himself as he gets off the bed to fish for his notes. And so, Izuku helps the athlete catch up on the lessons for the next however long. Izuku's window was still open, so there was a slight breeze coming in, lifting up the curtains. Outside, the sky was getting much darker, as Izuku's nap went way past overtime. They had papers spread out on the floor, and Katsuki was on his stomach, elbows digging into the ground, as he stared at his notebook in concentration. Izuku chewed on the edge of his pen as he waits for Katsuki to get each topic before moving on. It was surprisingly nice to see them doing something so normal, staying in to go over lessons and watching Katsuki be serious in a context outside of vault. Inko had knocked on his door at one point, to which Izuku had told her that he was on the phone with Katsuki to talk about the lessons. Later on, Izuku had crept down to his kitchen and made some simple sandwiches, before bringing them up with some drinks for the two of them to munch on. "If you leave any spills on my carpet, I'm going to fight you," Izuku warned. "Do you want to know how hard it is to get stains out of the carpet?" "Of all people, you're worried about me spilling something." Katsuki almost looked offended. "Yes." Izuku spun a pen around in his thumb. "Now, back to work. Chop chop, Kachan. We're on a social cognition." Katsuki reached over to flick him in the head. "Stop telling me what to do, Deku. I've been letting you get away with it way too damn often." It was oddly domestic. They continued until the iconic Issei crickets could be heard outside, chirping its pretty song for the moon and stars to hear. Yet they were cooped up on the floor of his bedroom, with a large lamp glow as light and the two of them getting distracted every 15 minutes. Studying in a group is never a good idea. Katsuki was fairly concentrated. It was just Izuku who would wander off into different tangents, while the athlete was trying to memorize some notes, which caused some scolding, but no serious reprimands. And even when it looked like they were done, Katsuki wasn't leaving. Izuku didn't mind. The blonde turned on his back, spreading out like a 6-foot 4-inch starfish, and looked up at the Izuku's ceiling, listening to whatever it was the brunette was saying. "Oi, you mind if I stay for a little while longer?" Katsuki asked.
My old hag is having some guests over, and I really don't want to fucking play nice. Of course you can, Izuku nodded. And since when do you ever play nice? Katsuki lifted his head slightly to give Izuku a look. Have you fucking met my mother? She'll kill me if I don't act decent when she needs me to. Oh, so the great Bakugo Katsuki is afraid of something after all. Izuku pokes him in the sides. At this, Katsuki got up on his elbows and looked at Izuku, brows pulled together. Say that again. Say what? Izuku asked. My name, Katsuki repeats. Say it again. Izuku blushed, now realizing that he probably, for the first time in a really long time, referred to the athlete by his real full name to his face. Why? He asked. Just do it, Katsuki told him. Bakugo... He had a hard time repeating the first name, which only now feels more intimate on his tongue as he thinks about it some more. Katsuki, the athlete finishes for him, still looking at Izuku with those piercing red eyes. Say it. Katsuki. Izuku wanted to look away. He wondered why the blonde wanted him to say it so bad, but he managed a small and soft Katsuki. That would probably mark the first time he said the name alone. Sure, he's had to clarify to others before who he was talking about when he says Kachan by saying the athlete's full name, but never just the first name alone. Although Katsuki was the one who told him to say it, the blonde still looked a bit startled when Izuku said his name, and they held this sorta odd eye contact for another couple seconds before Katsuki lays on his back on the ground again. That sounds fucking weird, Katsuki remarks, even though Izuku thought he looked a little stunned over something seemingly small. Izuku chuckles gently. Doesn't it? I guess that stupid nickname you gave me fucking stuck, Katsuki sneered. You know how hard it is to explain to people who Kachan is? Izuku looked down at his hands. I can stop if you want. Izuku didn't want to. He really didn't want to. Katsuki seemed like his answer was quick to form. Nah, keep it. Izuku felt some happiness bloom in his chest over that, and he leans back against his bed frame while sitting on the floor still. Hey, you want to go to the ravine on Friday? Katsuki grabbed a rubber ball from the floor and tosses it into the air. Nah, I'm going to the lake house party at Eknik Lake, and then looks over to Izuku. Oi, ain't one of your friends going to that too? Yeah, Ochaku is, Izuku nods. Once in a while, some people in the school, mostly seniors and juniors, go to Eknik Lake, and they have a lake house party. The fun part is that most of the party isn't actually in the lake house, but rather on the lake itself, on the open water. Since people in Ise own boats, considering that the town had just a ton of water-based activities, people would just bring their boats to an empty part of the lake and anchor it near each other until there's a mass of 10 or more boats touching and rocking against each other, close enough that people can hop from boat to boat like a damn trampoline park. Some boats were just simple pontoons or bass boats, while others had larger cabin cruisers or even small yachts. Izuku's seen videos and pictures from these parties, but like most events, he's never actually been. And you're not going? Katsuki inquired. Izuku shrugged. I just have to sit through an excruciating conversation to get permission, but we'll see. You can just sneak out or something, Katsuki suggested. I could. Izuku finds it funny how he doesn't freak out that much at the notion anymore. But I think I'd be a lot less paranoid if I just asked for permission. And I'll just tell my mom I'm going to sleep over at a Chaco's house or something. Katsuki gave him a look. And she finds no problem with you sleeping over at a chick's house. She knows I like boys, Kachan. It's not like she thinks I'm going to do anything. Katsuki hummed in acknowledgement. Right. Well, get your ass out of the house on Friday and have some goddamn fun. Izuku rubbed his arm shyly. I hope you don't see me as some charity case, Kachan. I don't mind staying in sometimes. Katsuki ran a hand through his own hair. That's not what I fucking meant. Izuku frowned, but nods, before laughing airily. We'll see, okay? Either way, he looked off to the side. It's not like you talk to me in public anyways. To that, Katsuki says nothing, and they leave the conversation where it is. The topic switches, and they settle into a more comfortable discussion about this and that as time wanes by. Soon enough, Izuku was pretty sure it'd be 10 p.m., but he's still sitting on the floor talking. Although the brunette could begin to hear Katsuki's words slurring as his responses became slower and slower, Katsuki was getting tired, and he could tell, and laying on the floor like that, the blonde was bound to fall asleep. It took another 10 minutes or so, but when Katsuki stopped replying, Izuku stupidly grinned to himself at how peaceful and innocent Katsuki looked when he was sleeping. The green-eyed boy sat there with his knees up for another minute or two, taking out his phone to document a picture for their project proof. These days, they hung out a fair bit, so they'd have to force a reminder to take pictures for proof in order to turn it in to Mr. Toshinori. Izuku thinks his teacher will appreciate this photo of Katsuki sleeping with his arms and legs sprawled all over his floor. After another moment, Izuku got up, legs going slightly numb, and grabbed some extra blankets and a pillow out of the closet and went over to crouch where Katsuki was. Careful to raise his head, Izuku slipped a pillow under and then covered the blonde in some fleece blankets before going to turn his light off. Stepping quietly into the bathroom, Izuku does his nightly routine and brushes his teeth before climbing into bed himself. He thought about how precious this moment was going to be to him in the future. It was like their sleepovers when they were little all over again. Katsuki was sprawled out on the floor, and he was in his bed. After hours of talking and trying to get work done, this was nice. And perfectly friendly. He didn't even remember the fact that he had came to the thought of Katsuki just hours prior. When Wednesday came around, Izuku was lying in his mother's room, just hanging out with her as he usually did. The things Izuku does with his mother are usually either domestic and very quaint. Inko Midoriya was a mellow person who enjoys being comfortable more than she enjoys being excited, who prefers a dish she's eaten a million times and knows is good over anything new and unpredictable. Her hobbies include taking care of their garden, working, hanging out with Izuku, cooking, and making Sunday afternoon runs to the farmer's market to see what cool items they have. And so much of the things Izuku does with his mother were rather simplistic in nature, hanging out on the couch or in her room, cooking together, picking blueberries at the farm once in a while, going to bookshops, manicuring the garden, and he doesn't generally mind. Sometimes life is meant to be taken slow. But he didn't realize how much he needed change until Katsuki had come along. But not all things have to change. Izuku still enjoys moments like this current one, where he lays in his mother's bed and Inko sits above him stroking his hair like when he was young, and they talk about all sorts of quaint things. Izuku tells her about his times at school or something cool that he's picked up, and she'd tell him stories from work. Snobby customers, sweet ones, entitled kids, humble travelers. She told him how a couple days ago this man in his mid-20s threw a fit and broke one of her items. She said she wasn't mad, but simply dealt with the man and done what he had asked so that he could leave her shop quickly. Inko has always taught him to be kind, caring, and grateful, which were all wonderful traits that he's thankful for, and Izuku could see that she practices what she preaches, for he truly believes his mother was kind at heart. The way she went about things was odd, and her treatment of him can be disagreeable, but Izuku was always in a state of confusion when it came to her. She was a mix of reasonable and unreasonable, paranoia and understanding, kindness and condescending. When she spoke with sweet words that tasted like nectar, Izuku couldn't tell sometimes if it was genuine or if she was just trying to guilt-trip him. "So Izuku," Inko teased while poking him, "do you have the hots for Katsuki?" Izuku whipped his head around and looked at her appalled. "Mom!" "What?" Inko kindly laughed. "I was just asking, so is that a yes or a no?" Izuku settled back into his spot, feeling strange as he says, "No, I don't like him like that." "You look at him as if you like him like that," Inko countered. Izuku gives her a sly look. "And how exactly do I look at him?" Inko raised her head to watch the fan spin before dramatically going into speech mode. "As if you could talk to him for hours and still dream of his voice when you sleep. As if you could have white diamonds in front of you, but you still prefer the ruby of his eyes." Izuku, for some reason, felt his heart tug at the statements, and felt embarrassed to realize that he probably did prefer rubies over diamonds, and that he most definitely had Katsuki in his dreams here and there. But he playfully threw a pillow at his mother. "If I didn't know any better, Mom, I'd think you like Kachan," he teased. Inko pinched his nose. "Oh, I adore him, Zuko. He's so tall, handsome, smart, and athletic." "Everyone else thinks that too," Izuku pouted unintentionally. "But we're just friends." Inko hummed. Well, you know what they say. Love is friendship that is caught on fire." Izuku noted that quote in his head. How interesting. The conversation topic shifts quickly, thank God, because he wasn't sure how much longer he was able to hold off before his mind does some deeper thinking into the matter. They lay there for a while, Inko playing with his fringe while she talks. "Hey, Mom," Izuku said while playing with some loose strings on the fabric of his blanket. "Can I sleep over at a Chaco's on Friday?" Inko still played with his hair, but she as usual goes quiet and pretends to think about it. Even though Izuku knew if she had her way, she'd have one answer prepared for everything he could ever ask for. Izuku's heart was beating. It was silly that he was 18, about to graduate, and his heart would still beat out of nervousness when he asked his mother to leave the house. No wonder Katsuki thought he was still naive. He bit his lip at the thought. "If you're going to sleep anyways, why not just sleep at home?" Inko asked him gently. Izuku shrugged. "Because it's more fun, you know?" "You can't have fun here?" Inko questions him, and Izuku knows this marks the beginning of the emotional guilt trip. "You've been going out a lot lately." "I know." Izuku's voice is quiet. "You've told me. Several times. And I do have fun here. You know, I love being with you, Mom. I just want to hang out with my friends since it's our last year together in Issei." "It's also our last year together, Izuku." Inko pursed her lips. Izuku turned his head back to look at his mother and smiled. "Mom, aren't you the one who says you want me to stay near after high school? Why do you change your words when it fits what you want?" At this, Inko's eyes widened as she realized what he meant, and her hand stopped playing with his hair, as if she had gone stiff, and then accused him with a soft voice that he almost hated hearing in moments like this. "Izuku, why do you always make me out to be some evil person?" Izuku was confused. "I'm not, Mom. And I'm going out more these days because I'm 18, and everyone is allowed to do things, and I'm barely even allowed to drive." "You're not everyone, Izuku," Inko accused him. "You're special. You're my baby, Izuku." The boy sighed. They've had the same conversation over and over again. "Mom, I don't think every mother on the planet..." "Mom, you don't think every other mother on the planet Earth thinks about their child like that? That they're special?" Inka goes silent at this, and leans her head back against the headboard of her bed. "Why do we have to argue so much lately? I hate it, Zuko. Getting angry is never good for anything." Izuku closes his eyes and says softly, "I know, I don't want to either." After a couple more moments of silence, Inko sounded reluctant. "You can go to Ochako's. But I need to put it out there that I like how we were before all of this started. I like that much more." Izuku then sat up, happy that he got permission but sad at the final remark. "Mom, why do you have to say things like that? It makes me feel like you're only happy when I'm doing everything that you want and being exactly who you want me to be." Like a lapdog, Izuku thinks back to what Katsuki had said before. Inko looked at him shocked, as if hurt. "Why would you say that, Izuku? I want the best for you, that's all." "I know, gosh, I know." Izuku looked frustrated as he runs his hands over his face. "Everything you do is because you're worried. I know, Mom." "Izuku!" Inko's tone was both pleasant but subtly warning. "Please calm down. You're getting angry. We don't need to be like that." Izuku closed his eyes and breathed deep breaths before looking at anywhere but her. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," she said carefully. "Here, go wash your hands and we can prepare dinner together." Izuku didn't want to. He didn't want to eat right now. Victories never felt like victories with his mother, and he just wanted to go up to his room, sneak out, and do something that'll take his mind off. But Katsuki was busy. His friends rarely initiate anymore because of how afraid they were of his mother, and all he had were 4 walls of his bedroom. He wanted to cry. On Thursday, Izuku brings the cherry Gatorade again and sits off the side watching Katsuki jump. Izuku personally hated the flavor despite liking cherries, but he knew that it was the athlete's favorite. When they were little, Katsuki probably drank more of the sports drink than he did water. Ever since Izuku began coming on Thursdays for solo practice, he's brought one with him for the blonde, and Katsuki would wordlessly drink it, and Izuku liked that fact. In a way, he felt as if it symbolizes Katsuki accepting his presence and accepting his care slowly. The blonde was getting a consistent 17 feet 10 at this point, but he'd failed to clear 17:11 every time. And in the world of competitive sports where people won by the slightest margins, even 1 inch makes the biggest difference. If it was true what his coach had said about another athlete in the adult vision his age already clearing 18.2, then Katsuki was going to lose. Izuku could tell there was something odd with the way Katsuki would approach the bar, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. They don't really talk to each other at practice. For Izuku, it was a bit of a respect thing. He needed to allow Katsuki full concentration, and so he just watched silently until he had to be home. That was enough for him. Ochako, can you help me look less? Izuku sat on the edge of the bed that Friday around 5 p.m. Babyish. The lake party started at 7 p.m., but it would probably take a while to get ready. Not to mention, Ochako had to drive down to the lake marina and get her family's pontoon boat out of the dock slot. Ochako was currently laying out dresses on the bed, looked over to him. Why? You're already cute. It's not that I don't like how I look, Izuku cups his cheeks. I just think that I dress and look kind of naive all the time. It'd be fun to look a bit more mature for once. Ochako nods and then narrows her eyes. That makes sense. But tell me, where did this come from? You've never really thought twice about your appearance before. Even when you began working out, it was because you wanted to get strong. Is that a bad thing? Izuku asked genuinely. To think about your appearance? That's not shallow, is it? No, of course not, Ochako replied, while bringing up a black dress to her body. If it was, then why would I bother trying to look hot tonight? Izuku, as long as we understand that appearance isn't all that matters, then it's perfectly okay to care what we look like, or to not care. It's all about personal choice. Right, Izuku laid back. I think I was wondering more about my own sex appeal. What do you mean? She sat up and looked at him. Izuku's head thought back to what Katsuki had said about moving aside and letting the adults play. Although it was a joke, Izuku still knew that for many people they probably could never see Izuku in a sexual manner. I feel like it's hard for others to imagine me mature in, that way, Izuku shyly said, because of how I look and act. Ochako thought about it. I don't think that's true, but I would say that people do generally see you as the town sweetheart and everyone's brother, be it younger or older. See, that's what I mean, Izuku threw his hands up. I just want to be sexy for once. He laughs at how ridiculous he sounds. Oh, Ochako then nodded. I get it. You're having a little coming-of-age movie moment here. She waves her hands around, where you're embracing your sexual side and letting go of your innocence. Don't talk like that. It's creepy, Izuku giggled. But yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I don't know why. He does know why. In that case, Ochako whips out a brush. I will help. The first thing Ochako does is mess up his hair some more, as if it wasn't already messed up. When asked why, the brunette says that it makes him look a bit sexier, as if he just rolled out of bed after a one-night stand, to which Izuku just laughs at her tactics. So then she asks the question that made Izuku halt. Do you, Ochako began, want to cover up your freckles? Izuku looked over to the vanity mirror and touches his cheek. Izuku looked over to the vanity mirror and touches his cheeks gently. My freckles? Yeah, it's up to you, she said. Covering up Izuku's freckles was different from just putting on different clothes or applying a bit of blush to his cheeks. Izuku felt conflicted, because he knew they made him look younger, but he's always secretly liked them. He wonders how far he'll go and how much that he'll actually liked about himself would disappear in this process. Izuku knew this was definitely not an everyday thing because he was comfortable in his day-to-day attire for the most part, but still, he thinks back to the people he's seen Katsuki take home before. Their skin was always flawless, not a blemish, not a single mole. They were all beautiful. Wait, he stops and asks himself why he thought of Katsuki and the people he fucked. That had nothing to do with him. But Izuku would be lying if he didn't accredit his recent thoughts about his appearance to the blonde. He wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but he knew that the line between how much he was doing this because he wanted to fit Katsuki's standards and how much he was because he genuinely wanted to look more desirable from time to time is getting really blurred. Because Izuku knew he should want to change to someone else's desires, but he was beginning to confuse himself. So shoving all those thoughts away, Izuku gave her a thumbs up. Go ahead. When they entered the marina, Izuku stepped out of Ochako's 2018 Honda Civic, feeling and looking completely different than what he was used to. And yet he didn't feel like he was forcing himself to be someone he's not. If this was every day, then he'd feel suffocated. But Izuku thinks that dressing up and appealing to his sexual side once in a while can be very empowering. His hair was rouged up. His skin looked flawless, not that he ever considered his freckles a flaw. He stared at himself shocked in the mirror after Ochako had done his makeup. His freckles were gone, and he immediately looked more mature, the contouring helping with his angles and lifted both of his cheeks and eyebrows. He had a light pink gloss painted on his lips, a faint blush, and basic makeup that made it look like he barely had any on. Glitter sparkled near his under eye, and that was that. But it was truly his outfit that was completely out of his usual attire. Since it was a lake party on boats, most everyone will be in swimwear or clothes that can easily be taken off to reveal swimwear. Even Ochako was wearing a black sheer mesh slip on top of a golden bikini underneath. All she had to do was take the see-through mesh slip off, and she'd be ready to swim. Izuku wore a silver necklace that spilled across his chest, with thin little bands ending in tiny crystal arrowheads. It was not too flashy, and a nice touch in the center of his chest. The silver was real, so it wouldn't smell upon touching water if he decides to swim with it on. He had a sheer white button-up shirt that was 2 times his size and made an airy chiffon fabric, and everyone could definitely see through the fabric like glass. He only buttoned the middle button, leaving the top part of his chest and bottom part of his abdomen relevantly exposed with every puff of wind that would blow the light fabric. The left sleeve kept falling off his shoulder, so at times he would forget about pulling it up, and underneath the oversized shirt, Izuku wore a pair of skin-tight black spandex swim shorts that began at his hips, hugged his perfect ass together, and ended right below where his ass and thighs met. It was borderline underwear, but damn, did he look good. And on his right leg was a silver thigh chain that wrapped around his thighs in a teardrop formation that sparkled with crystals every time he walked. He had been told not to bring shoes because he wouldn't need them on a boat anyways, so that was that. Ochako drove the pontoon at 40 miles per hour on the water, and on their way they saw a couple of others who were headed towards the part of the lake where the party was hosted to. This wasn't going to be like the kickoff. This was a full-on party, with alcohol, smokes, blaring music, and those classic teenage party vibes, except they were on a lake, which was so much better. The party was going to last until morning, most likely. Izuku knew Katsuki didn't smoke or participate in any drugs at all, partly because he didn't want to kill his performance, and partly because, as an athlete, if he gets drug tested before practically any event. And if there is even a trace of any substance, he's done for. And even when it came to alcohol, Katsuki didn't drink too much either. Not only is his tolerance high, but he didn't like the feeling all that much. Izuku, however, didn't care for any of those rules. He'd taken hits out of wax pens before, but didn't like the feeling, so he never indulged in it again. Alcohol was a once-in-a-while thing, since he didn't go to parties much. When he does, he usually had to go home, so it was only a can or two of beers or seltzer for him. But tonight, he could stay at the party until morning if he wanted to, so he didn't have any restrictions. Not that he wanted to get shit-faced or anything. The sun was setting behind them as they rode through the smooth lake water. Around the lake were all the tall trees blooming green, and everyone was beginning to turn on their internal and external boat lights. As they approached the site, Izuku began to hear the music. Summer Lovers by Michael Sembello. This was definitely a more low-key track, but fit the mood well, with an upbeat atmosphere of the lake party. Plenty of people were already there, with about 11 or so boats all anchored near each other. If anyone in the middle of the flock needed to go home early, they were a shit ton out of luck because everyone would have to unanchor themselves. And so, anyone who came here had to practically stay until the others began leaving. The smart ones, who couldn't go all night, chose to come later so that their boat was anchored on the outside of the mast. Or others just anchored their boats far away in general and swam the distance before climbing onto someone else's boat. It was a whole wild mess, but Izuku and Ochako were both were excited already. The music was playing from ridiculously loud speakers on someone's boat. It was a whole wild mess, but Izuku and Ochako were already excited. The music was playing ridiculously loud from speakers on someone's bass boat that had been dedicated to be the music boat. There were people everywhere. Some were swimming in the water off the sides. Others were mingling and boat hopping to talk to each other. Some were situated on a deck somewhere, drinking and laughing. Some rowdier people climbed to the second floor of the two-tiered boat and dived into the water off of it. Others danced to the music with a bottle of pink Whitney in their hands, or a beer. The sun was setting quick, and the vibes were only beginning. The boats would rock together every time someone would jump from one to another, but people got the hang of it after some time. They were all from Issei after all. All of these teens grew up boating. Ochako anchored their pontoon on the outskirts, dropping it into the water, and the people adjacent to them yelled a cheer upon seeing Ochako's and Izuku's familiar faces, giving them both high fives and helping them connect their boats together. Izuku was immediately bombarded with tons of comments, everyone excited and shocked at how different he looked. "Damn, Midoriya!" Kohima from his physics class commented from high up on another boat, a beer in his hand. He yelled, "You look great, man. I mean, you looked great before, but you look great in a different way now." Izuku laughed and yelled back, "That was my goal!" A more familiar face, Suyu Asui, was swimming in the lake nearby in her cute green bikini set. "Uraka! Midoriya! Come swim!" Ochako waved at her. "Hey, Asui, I'll come swim later. I think me and Izuku are going to grab ourselves a drink first." Although Ochako was driving the boat, they both agreed to at least stay out all night and stop drinking by midnight so that their bodies will at least have a couple hours to flush the alcohol out of their system. Unless one of them gets blacked out, then they didn't really have a plan. Hopping a couple of boats, and after talking to some people, they managed to find some people situated around a cooler, who waved them over excitedly. Tokoyami clapped. "What's good, guys? What do y'all want? We've got beers, liquors, and all kinds of stuff. I recommend some absinthe. That is some dark stuff right there. Really lets you meet the devil." Ichako gave him a high five and laughed. "Tokoyami, you're always saying some dark things. Can we just get some malts to start? We don't want to get heavy right away." "Sure thing," the dark-haired boy said before grabbing some malt liquor with 15% ABV from the cooler and tossing it to them. Izuku grabbed it and cracked it open, taking a small sip to begin. He wasn't the type to get drunk easily or even tipsy. He had a fair amount of muscle, a good metabolism, and genetically, it just took him a fair amount, so he wasn't worried about getting wasted right away. The liquor was bitter and honestly disgusting, but people rarely drink alcohol for the taste. Ochako grabbed him by the arm and led him onto the larger boat nearby where some people were dancing, and they both got pulled into the crowd, yelling the lyrics to Transparent Soul by Willow, a relatively modern song. Izuku bounced up and down on his feet and felt himself with his left arm, which wasn't holding the drink. He got approached about 3 times by different people, but Izuku couldn't find himself holding a long enough conversation, especially when they clearly wanted to fuck. The brunette had definitely accomplished, emitting a different kind of energy than he usually did because he felt good about himself, and every boat he went in order to greet a friend was surprised. They just enjoyed themselves for a while and sipped slowly while he was hanging out and dancing here and there. The sky was dark now, save for the boat lights, which was more than enough, and it felt like the night was beginning. When he climbs onto the larger deck boat, with nice lights and plenty of familiar faces, Izuku reaches out to help Ochako over. On this deck, Izuku sees Mina, Kirishima, Denki, Seiro, and a couple of other familiar faces. And so he assumes that soon he'd be seeing... fuck. It was as if he had manifested it, and then there. Because coming up from the bottom deck, the objectively most attractive blonde Izuku's ever seen, in the form of Bakugo Katsuki, came walking up, carrying a crate of seltzers. The blonde had a shark's tooth necklace around his neck, but other than that, a simple white tee and a pair of swim trunks. And yet he looks so fucking good, even if Izuku feels like he's seen a similar rendition of this outfit on Katsuki before. "Here you go, extras," Katsuki announced as he approached the group from behind and threw the crate on top of the table. "Go ahead and poison your livers." Denki laughed. "You know you'll have one sooner or later." Mina Ashido then whistled from a distance, causing Izuku to get his head back in the game. "Is that Midoriya and Uraraka?" she borderline screamed. It caused Kirishima to turn around, slightly wobbling and shouting, "What? Where? My precious sweet Midoriya and Ura... Holy fuck!" Kirishima spotted the two of them and yelled, "Holy shit. You guys don't look so sweet anymore. Damn! Jesus!" Dinky's eyes bugged out. "What happened to you, Midoriya?" Izuku laughed. "Ochako worked her magic on me." The two of them made their way over. Izuku caught Katsuki's eye as he walked over, and he didn't look too long afraid he'd come off as trying too hard to gouge the other's reaction. But in a couple of seconds they met each other's eye. Izuku could barely tell what Katsuki was thinking, only that those eyes most definitely trailed him. Before looking away, face not revealing too much, Izuku saw enough on his peripheral to notice Katsuki cracked his neck, muttered something to himself along the lines of "fuck," and then opened a bottle, bringing the seltzer to his lips and downing it in gulps. "Izuku?" Ochako reached for one. "Are you finished with the malt? I'll crack us open a seltzer." Izuku shook his head, a bit shy at the odd reaction from Katsuki. "No, I still have a bit left." The music was still playing loud, and they sat in the leather-cushioned chairs on the pontoon, and more people came up to their little group. Everyone was just talking and having a good time, and the atmosphere was nice. People were still swimming or dancing or just doing whatever people at parties do. At the moment, they were going around to tell dumb stories about what happens when certain people get drunk, and Izuku laughed a lot. He did notice, however, that a majority of the time, unless he was speaking, the blonde didn't really look at him. And at some point, they played a game. Once more people came to the group and wanted to do something fun. It was a simple party game. It starts at someone random, and the person on their left gets to ask an intrusive question. It'll usually be something weird or sexual, or really anything random. If the person who's it answers, they move on to the next person. If they refuse to answer, then the person on their right gets to choose a punishment. The game started with a person Izuku didn't recognize, and the person on the stranger's left had asked him if he loved his mother or father more. It was funny because the guy had quickly answered his mother and moved on to the next person without a fuss. Mina was next, and the stranger before asked her a much more invasive question. "Who was the last person you hooked up with?" And even thinking about it for a second, Mina's eyes went wide, and she tapped on the leg of Shoto, who had just arrived on her right. Izuku hadn't even known his friend was coming. "I'm not answering that," she giggled. "Give me a punishment, Todoroki." Shoto thought about it for a moment. "In full clothing, jump off the boat right now." With a groan, Mina hauled herself up and turned around, spreading her arms out before falling purposely off the boat. Moments later, they heard a splash and then Mina cursing once she resurfaced. They continued the game once she climbed back on. And they went around like this for a while. It's getting funnier and funnier. Sometimes it was sexual, as a teenage party game tended to be, Other times it was plain stupid. When it was Katsuki's turn, he answered his question easily. If you had to fuck everyone playing right now in order of most enjoyable to least enjoyable, where would I rank? Kirishima asked while laughing. Katsuki looked around and sneered. Literally last. Dead last on the list, shitty hair. The group laughed at that, and Kiri took it well, pretending to sob. Izuku found himself chuckling too, amused knowing that if nothing else, he wasn't last on the list. After a couple more rounds, it came around to Izuku and Sero, who was on his left, thought long and hard. What should I expose of sweet Midoriya? He ponders, then laughs, clapping his hands. I got it. Izuku grins. What is it? Midoriya Izuku, he announced. Who was the last person you've masturbated to? His grin immediately fell and his eyes widened. Oh no, that was not a question he wanted to answer. Hell, he barely faced the facts. In no world was he going to announce to this group, with Bakugo Katsuki in it, that the last person he's done that to was sitting right there. He felt everyone waiting for a reply. Without missing a beat, Izuku tapped Sochaku. Punishment, please. The group oohed at his secrecy. Tsuyu, who had climbed up to join the game, piped up. Now you just made us more curious. Izuku chuckled nervously. Well, too bad. Sorry to disappoint you guys. That's a little personal. Ochaku, thinking she had a great idea, jumped up to reveal the punishment. One person, no, 2 people have to spit alcohol in your mouth. And hard liquor, too, after they swish it around. Izuku gaped at her. I thought we were friends. We are, Ochaku frowned. I hope you know that when it's your turn, I'm going to get you back, Izuku warns playfully. Ochaku turned up towards the group. Any volunteers? A member of the school soccer team, who went by Ren, got up from his seat. Izuku looked up at him. They've only talked a handful of times, but he's always remembered Ren to be pretty nice to him. He was handsome, with dark gray hair and a nice face. Bet. Ren grabbed a bottle of whiskey. I'll do it. Izuku blinked. Are you sure? Ren shrugged as if it was nothing. Yeah, why not? Before bringing the bottle up to his lips, taking a gulp before leaving it in his mouth, and walked over to where Izuku was sitting. The greenet's face was pink, and this was definitely out of his element, but he scooted forward and tilted his head up, opening his mouth. Ren leaned in relatively close until they were about 6 inches apart, and then let the alcohol run from his lips into Izuku's mouth. The whiskey burned going down, and he shuddered as the last drops leaves the soccer player's mouth and Ren backs away. He heard cheers from the side of the display, and he hides his face, still feeling the burn of the whiskey. Ren just gave him a grin and went back to his seat. One more person, Ochaku demanded. Someone volunteer, or else I'll blindly point. She barely wastes 3 seconds before deciding to do. That's what she'll do. 1, 2, 3. Okay. No volunteers? Ochaku rushed through her counting, then closes her eyes and stands up, spinning and holding her pointer finger out. I guess I'll blindly point. And when she opened her eyes, Izuku knew right away that girl was peeking once her finger landed on Katsuki. She had definitely been peeking, and Izuku internally panics because there's no way Katsuki would do that. And it'd be embarrassing if he's rejected like this, even though it's just a game. And Izuku finds himself going on a mental rampage, and he's mumbling to himself at such a rapid rate that he barely notices movement. It was only when Katsuki gets up off his seat without a word and reaches for a bottle of strawberry vodka that Izuku stares wide-eyed. It was only when Katsuki gets up off his seat without a word and reaches for a bottle of strawberry vodka that Izuku stares wide-eyed. The athlete unscrews the cap, not looking at him, before tilting his head back to take a massive gulp. The group cheered. Holding the liquor in his mouth, Katsuki then turned towards him, walking forward until Izuku was sitting between his way. Izuku's eyes were still wide. The blonde's gaze was excruciating, and Katsuki puts one large hand on his jaw, while the other used the thumb to pry open Izuku's mouth. Feeling Katsuki's thick finger at his lips, pushing for entrance, had him opening his mouth while tilting his head up towards the other. The blonde then leaned down, much closer than where Rin had been, until they were probably an inch away from touching, and Katsuki then released the vodka into Izuku's mouth. It was a steady stream, and Izuku felt heated under all the touching. Katsuki's hand on his jaw, the other keeping his mouth open, the proximity of his lips as the alcohol fell from it into Izuku's throat. Izuku definitely could not imagine this was going to happen to him tonight. When Katsuki let go of the last drop, the blonde leaned his head over until he was right next to Izuku's ear and issued a command in his deep voice. "Now swallow, nerd." Izuku did so, and the heat from his throat, from the vodka, was not the only heat pulling into his body. When Katsuki moved back, his red eyes almost looked dazed, but he turned away and walked back to his seat as the group gaped at their incredibly tension-filled interaction. Katsuki collapsed back on his chair and doesn't think another second about it, while Izuku had to take a good minute before he could resume the game and ask Ochako her question. For the rest of the game, Izuku's mind could not stop going back to the scene, the touches, those words, that expression. He felt flustered, but he couldn't stop to think about it. And when the game went around one whole time, they wanted to play again, but Izuku went to excuse himself. A couple of others wanted to go off somewhere else too, but Ochako stayed behind to play another round. Stretching as he got up, Izuku moved his way through the group until he was out of the vicinity and then started to go onto another boat. He continued what he was doing before to clear his mind of how much he secretly enjoyed that whole performance, going from boat to talk to friends or meet new people. He was asked by several people if they could get him a drink. He told them not now, and went until he was at the front of the boats. Unsure of what he was to do here, he was about to leave before he heard a familiar voice. "Oi, Jaku," Katsuki shouted from the boat below the taller one. Izuku stepped over and looked down. "Kachan? Who the fuck else?" The blonde rolled his eyes. "I'm about to swim. You gonna get in, or are you just gonna stand off in the distance like a loser?" Izuku stuck out his tongue at the athlete, then climbed down on the shorter boat until he was next to the athlete. "I'll get in." Katsuki stripped his shirt off until he was just in his swim shorts. "Oi, wait. Are you sober enough to swim?" Izuku nodded. "Yeah, I don't get drunk very easily. Thank you for worrying, though." "I wasn't." Katsuki stood off as Izuku slides out of the sheer shirt easily. "I just didn't want to be liable for your death, nerd." Izuku doesn't believe it and smiled with his eyes. "Sure, Kachan," before pushing the blonde in with a splash, and Katsuki flopped on his stomach. When Katsuki rose to the surface, wet hair and all, Izuku jumped up and down on the boat, laughing and pointing. "I finally got you back! Who's the boss now?" And then Izuku jumped in himself, feeling the warmer lake surrounding him. His body jewelry was still on, and when he opened his eyes underwater, the silver shimmered. Most of the boats had bright blue underlights that lit up the water a couple feet underneath them. The light would reflect back onto the sides of the white boats, creating watery light patterns. He broke the surface with a gasp and treaded water. Katsuki kicked him under the water. "You're a bitch, Deku." "You did it first," Izuku cackled. "This is just the natural order of life. It's payback." The blonde then began swimming away and towards the underside of one of the larger boats, so that he could get the lighting from the water. The light patterns rippled onto Katsuki's face. "This is something, huh?" Katsuki nodded his head to the lake party. Izuku shook his head yes. "Yeah, I've never been to one before, so this is really fun. I didn't expect there to be so many people, though." "It gets more crowded every year," Katsuki commented. "The cops know there will be underage drinking, but none of them care. No one's ever gotten hurt here." "Really?" Izuku looked skeptical. "There's people jumping off boats while drunk." Katsuki's limbs getting sick of treading water, then holds onto the boat hook underneath the cruiser. That's usually attached to a trailer that pulls the boat on land. Meanwhile, Izuku continued to tread water. "There's always a sober friend in the group to be on the lookout." Katsuki shrugged. Izuku hummed in acknowledgement. "So," Katsuki grinned, "you convinced Auntie to let you go?" Izuku groaned. "Don't even talk about that. Thinking back on that conversation makes my head hurt." "That bad, huh?" the athlete commented. "Could have been worse," Izuku admitted, trying to think positively. "Also could have been better," Katsuki countered. "Is she expecting you to come home early or some shit?" Izuku shook his head. "No, she thinks I'm sleeping over at Ochako's." Then he laughs. "Imagine if I show up at 3 a.m. with that outfit, and my breath reeking of alcohol. I'd never see the light of day again." Katsuki considered that. So it was Roundface's idea, huh? What was? Izuku asked. Oh, the outfit? It was my idea. She just brought it to life. Your idea? Katsuki raised the brow. And what brought that on, huh? Izuku, instead of answering that question, decides to redirect the topic. Kachan, it's a little unfair that you get to hold onto the boat hook, and I'm stuck here treading water. My arms are tired too, you know. Then come here, Katsuki told him. Hold on to me, nerd. Izuku blinked. Huh? Katsuki rolled his eyes and reached one arm out until it hooked around Izuku's waist, and pulled him closer through the water. Moving his arm down, Katsuki moved Izuku's legs so that they rested around Katsuki's torso, allowing the water buoyancy to hold him up. Izuku, shy, held onto Katsuki's shoulders, as his legs were now wrapped around the blonde's waist. Katsuki continued to hold onto the boat hook with his left arm, and his right arm held Izuku in place. You're not afraid of a little proximity, are you, Deku? Katsuki asked with a sneer. I don't fucking bite. Yes, he was afraid. But Izuku didn't want to move. Yes, you do, he argued. Remember when we were 4, and you bit me when we were playing vampires? You were supposed to pretend bite me, not actually bite me. Oh, give me a break, Katsuki groaned. It was a tiny bite. Tiny? Izuku looked incredulous. I have a scar. You're fucking lying, Katsuki accused. Show me. Izuku raised his left arm and pointed at a bump on his inner forearm. See? Right there. Deku, that's literally a mosquito bite. Katsuki deadpanned. It's literally not, Izuku retorted. Yes it is, he insisted. There's no way I left a scar. You're being fucking overdramatic. Auntie would have killed me. I wouldn't have been here right now if I left a scar. That's my proof. Where's yours? Izuku was this close to dunking Katsuki's head underwater. You were a feral child, Kachan. Do you remember that? It's not exactly out of character for you to have bitten your freckles, Katsuki suddenly interrupted, eyes scanning his face intently. Where are they? Huh? Izuku brought a hand up to his face, feeling his skin, before remembering. Oh, my freckles? Yeah, where did they fucking go? Katsuki brought his free hand up that was holding Izuku in place, up to cup Izuku's cheek, while his thumb rubbed at his skin roughly, pushing some of the makeup away. But Ochako's waterproof setting spray was impossible to get rid of. Izuku squirmed out of his hand. Kachan, stop that. You'll rub off the foundation. Ochako worked hard on it, he said. She covered them up? Katsuki's brows furrowed. Izuku nodded, suddenly looking away and lit up the water underneath them. Katsuki raised a brow. And you let her? The boy in question just shrugged. Yeah? Why? Katsuki inquired. Because, Izuku tried to play it cool. I don't know. They kind of make me look childish. Katsuki looked at him skeptically. Since when did you care about how you looked? Izuku frowned. Why can't I? You can, Katsuki then asked. Is this about what I said the other day? No, Izuku exclaimed, unsure if he was telling the truth. It's not. Then why? Katsuki seemed persistent. Izuku shrugged, not really wanting to get into the conversation. Katsuki pursed his lips and said, Oi, just tell me, do you like your freckles? Izuku doesn't understand why they're having this conversation about his freckles, but he purses his lips. Of course he does. He's always liked them, so he tells the truth. Yeah? Then don't cover them up, Katsuki stated clearly. Izuku's eyes went big before he laughed to himself. You almost sound like you miss them. Katsuki flicked him on the forehead with a dripping hand. And if I said I did, would you wipe your face off? Izuku smiled softly. You would never say anything like that. But if I did, Katsuki repeats. Would you? Who knows, Izuku said, waiting to play with Katsuki's wet hair. Maybe if you said it really nicely. Really now, Katsuki quirked a brow. Izuku laughed, shrugging his shoulders. Then he heard footsteps and the sound of some of Katsuki's friends' voices coming closer. He listened, and it sounded like Kirishima and Mina. Hearing them too, Katsuki taps on Izuku's arm and told him, Alright, climb off. Izuku pursed his lips before letting go and sliding back into the water, going back to treading. Katsuki then swims toward the boat that they had just jumped off from, and climbed onto the deck, shaking his hair to get the water out. His friends spotted them and walked towards the taller male. Izuku watched from the water, trying not to take it to heart that once his friends were around, Katsuki didn't want them to be seen near him. He tries not to let it hurt him, but he couldn't help feel a sting. Katsuki had no problem treating his other friends like, well, friends in public. So why was it so hard to treat him like a friend in front of others? After all, everyone knew they hung out. Kirishima spots him in the water and calls out, "Midoriya, you swimming by yourself?" Izuku let out a small smile and nodded. "Yeah, the water feels nice. I think I'll stay in here for a little while longer." Kiri and Mina understood, wishing him a good time before they called Katsuki along. Right before the blonde turned around, Izuku caught his eye, and the brunette made it a point to look away fast. And so he swims by himself for a little longer, while stopping to hold on to something here and there to let his arms rest. The water felt warm, and the bright blue glow was beautiful. He plans on getting back to the more centralized part of the party soon, but first he wants to kind of just sit there and take it all in. Aside from small things, he was pretty happy. He couldn't prove that Katsuki swam away because he didn't want to be seen with Izuku. Maybe he had just wanted to catch up with his friends. After all, Katsuki had literally spit in his mouth not too long ago in front of a group of people. And so, Izuku let himself relax and enjoy it. He thinks about what the blonde said about his freckles. And for a moment there, he felt himself being filled with this useless sense of joy at the fact that Katsuki might as well have told Izuku that he liked his freckles. After a bit, Izuku climbed up on the deck and just throws the sheer shirt over his clothes before hopping the boats again towards where there was more people. Once again, he takes his time, stopping to talk to friends and catch up. He even sat with some of his badminton buddies and caught up for a while, having a fun time. He caught Ochako at one point dancing with a group of people on a deck, and he joined her briefly before sitting down somewhere. He was by himself, swinging his legs off the edge for a moment before someone plopped down next to him. He turned to the side and came face to face with the Ren guy from earlier. "Hey." Izuku smiled and waved at him. "Hey, Ren." "Are you good?" he asked. "You're just kind of sitting by yourself, looking off." He laughed. "No, I'm fine," Izuku assured him. "I'm just taking in the moment." Ren nodded. "Earlier, that didn't make you uncomfortable or anything, did it?" "Oh, no," Izuku shook his head. "It's just a game. Thank you for asking, though, even retrospectively." He giggles. Ren smiled kindly. "Can I get you a drink? Sorry to be so frank, but I've been eyeing you all night." Izuku looked over, surprised at the frankness, and he couldn't really bring himself to say yes because of the connotation, but instead offers, "Not right now, but," he smiled, "you can walk me around." Ren nodded to himself and then got up, extending a hand. "I can do that." And so they walked around, hopping boats, which was a fun activity in itself. Ren was a nice person who expressed his attraction to Izuku pretty soon, and the brunette wonders if this is how a hookup starts. Do they just hang out a little bit before going for it? Either way, Izuku just wanted to walk around and chat for a bit. Their conversation wasn't anything special, but it was nice to catch up with an old classmate. Ren wasn't shy about lingering his hands on Izuku's waist, or whispering something in his ear here to there. At some point, it seemed like the boy was going to shoot his shot. "I'm not gonna lie, Midoriya." Ren turned to him at one point and got a bit close. "My cabin cruiser's nearby. There's a private cabin quarters in there that I'd really," he took a step closer, "like to show you, if you know what I mean." Izuku looked up at him, eyes blinking fast. "I'm not gonna lie, Midoriya." Ren turned to him at one point and got a bit close. "My cabin cruiser's nearby. There's a private captain's quarters in there that I'd really," he took a step closer, "like to show you, if you know what I mean." Izuku looked up at him, eyes blinking fast, a habit he's developed when someone says something that caught him off guard. Ren's been touchy with him and obviously flirtatious, making innuendos here and there, so it shouldn't be a surprise. But as someone with relatively little experience, Izuku wasn't sure how to act. He's kissed like 2 people and gave a half-assed hand job before during his experimenting phase, and probably 1 blowjob. However, considering that he was never allowed to go out much, Izuku wasn't given the opportunity to go farther, and he barely felt any intimate connection with Ren. But then again, did he need to? A cheer erupts from a boat adjacent to them, interrupting their conversation, and both Ren and Izuku turned to see what the commotion was. Turns out it was merely a game of cup pong that was being played, with a good crowd around them. Kirishima and Mina were there, which means that if he hadn't strayed off, then Katsuki would be there with them too. And that's when he spots the blonde. Currently playing was the boy named Juzo, and up against a girl Izuku recognized to be Kimi from the school's volleyball team. She was all legs, beautiful with almond eyes and full lips. Her slightly wavy brown hair reached the small of her back, and she had the cutest smile. Izuku always thought she was nice, a little on the wild side, but nice regardless. But that wasn't what Izuku found himself focusing on. What he was focusing on was a hand on her waist that belonged to Katsuki. He shouldn't be surprised at this point, because this was what Katsuki was known for, and yet Izuku felt those familiar gut pulls again, like his stomach was curling in on himself. She picked up a ping-pong ball and got into position before shooting it into the cup, making the opponent drink and ultimately winning. The crowd cheered, and Kimi jumped up, letting out a happy shout, before turning to Katsuki and jumping up into his arms. He caught her easily, as if his large arms were just meant to hold something as delicate as her, and lifted her up. Then she leaned in to kiss him, and Katsuki returns the favor, getting into it right then and there. Izuku remembers the time when the other girl from the kickoff, Sarah, had come to Katsuki, and although Izuku was curious as he always was, he wasn't feeling what he was feeling now. Then he had been able to tell himself that it wasn't his business and walked away. But now he was entering a different turf. For a bit now, Izuku had been feeling those weird tugs in his chest every time he'd overheard something like this. But when he was standing just a boat away, watching it happen with his own eyes, seeing Katsuki's lips in an intense lock with someone else's, the sensation was incomparable. Izuku panicked. He wasn't supposed to be feeling like this. He's been able to ignore it and brush it aside before, but now it was coming on full force. Like he was sick to his stomach, and the twisting just wouldn't go away. He couldn't look away. Katsuki set her down, but continued to kiss her as the crowd cheered around him. Izuku looked down at his feet, then chest feeling like it was out of breath, and he wanted to get this feeling to go away. And now he couldn't deny it. He couldn't reject what it was, like he's been doing all of this time. The feeling slapped him in his face and made him feel ashamed. Heat traveled up to his face as embarrassment took over. He was so stupid. How could he let himself act so stupid? He couldn't pretend it wasn't there. Jealousy. Izuku was jealous, and he hated that feeling, jealous in the first place. Because Katsuki wasn't his, and he didn't like the blonde like that, he thought. He fucking thought. But then, the athlete storms his way into Izuku's life, and no, that didn't have to mean anything, Izuku told himself, because he didn't like Katsuki like that. Or at least, he didn't want to like Katsuki like that, because that would have been a recipe for disaster. Because Katsuki didn't like people. Katsuki fucks whoever he wants, and shoves them away if they seem to catch feelings. Katsuki purposely chose to keep himself emotionally isolated, and would not hesitate to drop anyone, even a friend, if they pry a little too hard into his emotional shell. Katsuki would never feel the same. Therefore, Izuku shouldn't be feeling this way. He shouldn't be jealous, because that would be assuming that he wanted Katsuki, and that simply cannot happen. Izuku rejects the notion. This can't happen. It won't happen. Midoriya? Rin calls from the side, hand on his shoulder. Are you alright? This snaps Izuku back into the moment, and he looked over to the taller boy. He needed to get rid of this feeling. It isn't real, and he couldn't make it go away if he tried hard enough. How about that drink? Izuku asked, a hint of desperation in his voice, but Rin didn't catch any of it. Instead, the boy's eyes lit up, and he smirked. Let's go get a drink, then. It was more like several drinks, because Izuku didn't care how high his tolerance to alcohol was. He was going to get rid of this feeling. Izuku took a shot of hard liquor. Rin was right beside him on someone's bar they had set up on the boat. The liquor burned his throat going down, but he asked for another anyways. Some people were nearby and were shouting shots around them. When another one reaches his hand, Ren hooked his arms with him, and they both tilted it back at the same time. This one burned less, because higher alcohol contents eventually numb your throat when it goes down. Another one, Izuku demanded. The girl in charge of pouring shots looks at him carefully. Are you sure? They hit quick. You probably can take it slow now. Another one, Izuku tried again, and then she gave it to him, and Izuku threw it back. Ren did the same. The reason the shots hit stronger and faster than anything else is because two things: the ABV of the liquor used and the speed of the consumption. The quicker a person consumes alcohol, the more saturated their blood alcohol content becomes, and the more drunk they'll get. However, genetics and the body weight plays an important factor. So with Izuku's sturdy figure and Ren's athletic build, they didn't get shit-faced immediately. And so, at his fourth shot, Izuku was feeling much looser, tinglier, and his thoughts a bit more impaired. He was giggling to himself, eyes a bit hooded. Ren looked to be close to out of it too, leaning closer and swaying to the music drunkenly before whispering to him, God, you look so sexy right now. Izuku giggled. The feeling he had before definitely was gone now. Do I? Ren brought a hand up to his chin and asked, So, how about that trip to the captain's quarters? Izuku covered his hands over the others and closed his eyes. Sounds good to me. He was slightly slurring, but was cognitive enough to walk. Ren reached down to kiss him, and Izuku kissed back. The people around them saw it, but since both of them were drunk, didn't think too much of it. Ren took him by the wrists and began leading the other off to the boat towards the left side of the party area. Izuku had a much slower time hopping off of the cruiser, but when he made it to the captain's quarters, partially surrounded by glass, but had enough opaque wood panels to cover half of the quarters, Izuku was pushed up and down on the drawer, his legs pushed open, as Ren slots himself in between and continues to make out with the greenette. Sensations while drunk are dulled, and so you have to act a little more desperate. Izuku wasn't sure where his head was at, but it wasn't on Katsuki, that was for sure. Meanwhile, word was going around that Izuku was wasted as hell, and seemed to be headed off somewhere with the soccer player Ren. No one was judging him for it or anything. They just cheered him on since it was rare that anyone would see the usual safe-playing town sweetheart do anything risque. That being said, there were still the concerns of what Ren and Izuku could be doing, considering that they were both drunk. You know Midoriya? Someone asks. Yeah, what about him? Another person replies. Apparently he's drunk as hell right now, like completely wasted on shots. He was going wild with it at the bar with Ren, that one from the soccer team. They were recapping. Anyways, they were making out before the two went into Ren's captain's quarters together, and the rest of the conversation wasn't relevant because to a certain blonde athlete who was standing in a group nearby to where the conversation was happening, that was all he needed to hear. Izuku felt lips everywhere. Although his clothes were still on, he felt lips trailing his neck, his chest, his stomach. In his dazed state, he didn't care. He just wanted to feel any sensation besides the horrible one he felt earlier. Ren's arms were wrapped around his waist. The soccer player was just standing between his legs, hard on rubbing up against Izuku's spandex swim trunks. He knew that the other was drunk as well, judging from the sloppiness of his actions, but Izuku could barely mind that at the moment. He didn't know how long they were making out like that. They were close to taking it one step closer. Ren slid Izuku's sheer shirt off easily and grabbed at his thighs, kissing him softly as he does so. Ren then steps back and undoes the buttons of his shorts before pulling the smaller back in to make out. Breathing into his mouth, Izuku hears the other tell him, "You want to go further?" His back was pressed up against the wood panel and his legs were wrapped around Ren's waist. The boy in question kisses him again and runs his hands through the messy green locks about a minute before the door was flung open. Suddenly, a cool breeze whips through the room, and everything that happens next went by ridiculously fast. A person who Izuku could recognize anywhere by the signature voice, hair, eyes, and build, everything comes slamming the door open, and makes his way to the two of them, and in the split second before throwing a punch square in Ren's jaw, and he fell to the floor. "I'll fucking kill you!" Katsuki's voice was terrifying and "I'll fucking kill you." Katsuki's voice was terrifyingly normal tone, as if he had this deep rage that didn't even make him shout. And he lifted, "I'll fucking kill you. I'll fucking kill you." Katsuki's voice was terrifyingly normal tone, as if he had this deep rage that it didn't even make him shout. And he lifts Rin up by the shirt collar. "You hear me? I'll fucking kill you. Whoa, whoa, Bakugo! Kirishima shouts after him, and a crowd forms outside the entrance of the quarters. Calm down! Katsuki ignores him and continues threatening Ren. The stupid fucking nerd is drunk as shit, and you wanna fuck him? Zip up your pants, you piece of shit. I'll break your legs if you don't get out of my sight right fucking now. Ren looks terrified as he slurs. But what? Ren looks terrified. Kirishima from the back forces Katsuki back. Bakugo! Fuck, listen! The dude is drunk too. Ren is drunk too. Neither of them can consent. It's not just Midoriya, so calm the hell down. You're losing your shit. Katsuki, upon hearing that, looks over to the guy on the floor, clutching his jaw, and turns to Kirishima. Why the fuck didn't you tell me that before I beat the shit out of him? I thought you knew! Kirishima threw his hands up. I thought you'd just go to pull them apart or something so they both don't end up doing something they didn't want to. I didn't think you'd fucking try to break his jaw. Jesus, Bakugo, what the fuck? Katsuki stares at him for a second, incredulous, before telling the redhead, take care of this son of a bitch and I'll deal with Deku. No offense, Kira started, but I'm not sure most people here would trust you to deal with Midoriya. Katsuki took a step forward towards Izuku, who was sitting confused on the ledge still, before turning. What the fuck is that supposed to mean, shitty hair? Kirishima sounded a bit nervous, and the chattering of the people outside watching the commotion didn't help. It's just that you guys aren't known to get along, even if you do hang out for a project, and I feel like someone who actually cares for him would be better to help. Kirishima confesses his thoughts on the matter, and Katsuki's face was just blank. Nothing revealed itself. From behind them, Denki scooted through the crowd to ease the tension. Hey, maybe we can just take care of Midoriya and you can just... Katsuki turned back around and walked over to Izuku, warning. No one is fucking touching him. Do it and I'll break your damn hand. And he turned towards them, and trust me, as a pole vaulter, you're gonna need your wrists. Katsuki grabs the shirt off the ledge and drapes it over Izuku's shoulders, buttoning it up slightly. Kachan? Izuku's eyes focused, and he definitely knew what was happening. He just couldn't think much about it. The one and only, Katsuki told him, focused as he checks for Izuku's dilated pupils. Can he walk? Izuku nodded slowly. I can walk. Why'd you just do that just now? He says slowly. Katsuki brings him down to the ground. Because you should never fucking make those kinds of decisions when you're wasted. Izuku giggled. But I can when I'm sober? Katsuki leads him out of the quarters, ignoring everyone else's stares. I don't give a shit who you fuck when you're sober, but I'm not letting you do that shit when you're drunk. You hear me? Izuku complains. Okay, I get it. But why does it have to be you who came? Katsuki turned to look as they walked. You want it to be someone else, nerd? In his delirious state, Izuku admits quietly. Anyone else? And why's that? Katsuki humored. Izuku brings his finger to his lips and shushes. I can't tell you. I didn't really care anyways, Katsuki shrugged. I came, so shut the fuck up, and you can thank me when you're sober. Izuku pouts. You're unfair. And you're stupid as shit right now, Katsuki retorted. And I'm not listening to a word you say, so keep walking. Where are we going? Izuku looked around, and Katsuki helps him on a boat, and Katsuki helps him on and off boats until they get to the quieter side. A white speedboat named Gran Torino. Home. Katsuki replies curtly. Home? Izuku, even in his dazed state, panicked. But my mom, she'll... Not yours, Katsuki barked. Mine. The old hag isn't home. Izuku's lips wobbled. But Kachan, I don't want you to miss the party. And it's not even a school night either, so you can stay as long as you want. Katsuki went quiet at this, and then he begins driving away, tells Izuku, I don't care for it anyways. When they got back on land, Izuku could walk pretty well to Katsuki's car after he docked the boat. The blonde had given them some food to eat and some water to drink in order to get the alcohol out of his system faster, and the ride back to Katsuki's house was mellow. There was some soft music playing, but Izuku's head was slumped against the headrest, while Katsuki was uncharacteristically quiet. What are you thinking about? Izuku asked at some point. This delirious state is out of his system, and now he just feels slowed down. Katsuki didn't look like he was going to reply for a while, but ultimately let out something somebody said. Hey, those words all started with an S, Izuku pointed out, laughing. Katsuki tissed. very observant. But Izuku was cognitive enough to get back on track, asking softly, "And it bothered you?" Katsuki shifted, uncomfortable in his seat, and Izuku could even tell that he might be entering into some territory that Katsuki will keep him out of. "I don't know," Katsuki replied, and weirdly enough, Izuku could tell he was speaking the truth. "Oh," Izuku replied, not sure what to say to this, but he wonders what it is, and he wishes he could delve into Katsuki's mind and figure it out. Yet Katsuki's point of view always felt closed off to him. Katsuki then asked, "Thought you didn't get drunk easily, huh, Deku?" "I don't," Izuku admits. "Then why tonight?" Katsuki pulls up in the driveway. Izuku hasn't been here in years, and now he shows up dead in the middle of the night with a fairly high BAC. Izuku tries to form coherent sentences, but then gave up, letting out a quiet, "I had a bad reaction to seeing something. It was my fault, really." Katsuki raised a brow at this. "What'd you see?" Izuku smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes, before speaking, mimicking Katsuki's previous words. "Something somebody did."
Okay, here's a really funny blooper.
His wrists, stopping the contact. "Sex," the other replied frankly. "What? Huh? Huh? Why are you in the tub? What?
It feels good. I couldn't hear what you were reading, but I could tell that you're reading because it's none of your voice.
Yeah."
Okay, keep on.
Okay.